Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 ANS. We are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto unleashed thousands of shadow clones against Mizuki Part 1? A shrine in the woods. About time. Nosebleed. I found you. Naruto posed, pointing at the sky with both hands. He was a bit tired from all the training he'd done, but this was no time for that. He'd succeeded. He'd learned one of the techniques from the scroll. No, you fool. I found you. Iruka's head almost seemed to enlarge itself, which wasn't anything unusual, as the man always seemed to be mad at him for some reason or another. And like usual, with a sigh, the Chunin calmed himself as he began to look over his pupil. Naruto looked dirty and exhausted, as if he'd spent the last several hours rolling around in the mud. Something felt off about this whole situation to the Chunin. He didn't know what just yet, but he was sure his student had a good reason for his actions. Or even barring that, did not realize the gravity of the situation he was in. Hey, I guess you got me. Too bad you were so fast. With a little more time, I could have memorized more than one technique. You look exhausted. What have you been doing? Naruto's face lit up at his teacher's question, unable to contain his excitement. Wait till I show you. These techniques are amazing, and if I prove to you I've mastered one, you'll have to let me graduate. Taken aback, Iruka had never expected during all this mayhem, Naruto hid in the woods to practice. That Naruto, practicing, it was unheard of. Well, unless you count the routine Anbu goose chase every time he defaced the 4 cages' faces. So, you came here to practice your ninjutsu? Working yourself to exhaustion at that? Naruto. Yeah, what's up with that scroll you're carrying? Iruka, already knowing the answer, was still dreading what Naruto would say next. What this? Mizuki-sensei told me about it. And about this place. He said if I could show you I'd learn the techniques in this scroll. Mind whirling, Iruka put his training to good use, already thinking of a plan, as Naruto continued talking. You'd let me become a ninja. Iruka pushed his student out of the way just as a wave of kunai pierced through where he'd just been standing. His student made it out unscathed, however, Iruka was far less fortunate, having several lodged in various parts of his body. I'm impressed you figured out where to go. Mizuki could be seen in the distance, having been the one who'd thrown the kunai. Now I understand. Everything had become clear to Iruka. Naruto was not some traitor, not that he believed that for a second. No, Mizuki had simply tricked the foolish boy into carrying out his dirty work. The scroll, Naruto. Give it to me. Naruto was not clued into any of these finer details, was now left confused by the violent display from one of his teachers. Dude. I mean, come on. Hey, what is this? Fearless, Iruka stepped forth to guide and protect Naruto. Don't let him have it, Naruto. Protect that scroll with your life. It's more dangerous than you can imagine. It holds the records of the village's forbidden ninja arts. Mizuki is using you because he wants it for himself. Naruto, now defensive of his teacher turned traitor, began to ready himself for a fight. He would not back down if it came to it. Smirking, Mizuki started, Naruto, even if you've read the entire scroll, it will still be meaningless. I can show you what it all means. Iruka immediately picked up on the hidden meaning behind Mizuki's words. Shut up, you fool. You want to know what really happened 12 years ago, with the demon fox? That confused Naruto. What did the demon fox have to do with the scroll? Why, of all times, was Mizuki bringing it up now? Since the incident, the people of Konoha, of our village, have been bound by the strictest decree. Mizuki paused, letting his words sink in. I don't remember any decree. You wouldn't. Part of that decree was that everyone would stay silent about it, only those who were alive back then know about it. Naruto was stunned. Where was all this going? What decree? What made it so important that no one could talk about it? Mizuki just laughed, frightening Naruto. What was the decree? That no one must ever tell you, that the demon fox that destroyed the village all those years ago, is you. Naruto's mind faltered, and he fell to the forest floor. What are you talking about? Stop. Iruka shouted. The village's secret could crush his young pupil. The 4th Hokage trapped and bound you in this form. Since then, everybody in the village has hated you. Didn't you think it was strange to be hated everywhere despite never having done a thing? Naruto did not want to believe it, but all the pieces matched together. It would explain everything, why everyone had hated him all these years. And if Iruka were honest, even he would admit he hates you. You're responsible for the deaths of his entire family, after all. Naruto was destroyed at that moment, as he began to slip into a dark place within his own mind. Mizuki, ready for that exact moment to strike, threw an oversized shuriken at Naruto, attempting to snuff out the boy's life in one throw. Naruto accepted his rapidly approaching fate, and resigned himself to death, closing his eyes one final time. Only to never feel the pain that was surely supposed to happen before death. Opening his eyes, he found Iruka over top of him, smiling down at him, blood dripping from his lips. Why? Naruto could not understand Iruka. Why would Iruka protect him of all people? I know that, Naruto. I was so hard on you, yelling, scolding, it must have hurt. Forgive me. If I'd been a better teacher, a better self, maybe neither of us would be here right now. What Iruka did not say was how much he saw himself in Naruto, the loneliness, acting out for attention, and how hurt he was deep down inside. Naruto, still afraid of the truth that was just laid bare before him, ran. Ha, what a pity, but I'm afraid, once Naruto sets his mind on something, he can't be dissuaded. He's going to use the scroll to take his revenge on the village. Even now, his eyes are still those of the demon fox. Mizuki began to gloat, sure of his control over the situation. Removing the shuriken from his back, Iruka responded while struggling to breathe, "You don't know Naruto at all. I don't have to know the boy to kill him. It's the scroll I'm after now. I'll finish you later." Mizuki jumped atop the trees, heading off in the direction that Naruto ran. Naruto, quickly, give me the scroll. It's what Mizuki's after. Naruto did not hesitate, ramming directly into his teacher, sending him barreling to the ground. What's wrong, Naruto? As Iruka struggled to get up, the transformation was undone, revealing Mizuki. How did you know I wasn't Iruka? Laughing, Naruto undid his transformation, revealing Iruka. Because I am. I see. Smirking, the teacher and the teacher-turned traitor stared each other down. Mizuki was clearly in the dominant position, with Iruka struggling to remain conscious while leaned up against a tree for support. Naruto lurked in the distance, hidden behind a tree, listening in. He. So noble, saving your parents' murderer, and for what? What happens if we let him live? Then maybe the scroll will be kept safe from a complete scumbag. You're a fool. Naruto and I are two of a kind. Iruka questioned. Two of a kind? I can use that scroll to obtain limitless power. The demon within him hungers for that kind of strength. You were right to fear him, to despise him. Iruka could not retort to what Mizuki had been saying, his silence eating away at Naruto's fragile psyche. So it's true, Iruka-sensei really does hate me. Maybe I do hate the fox, but not Naruto. Not the boy. For him I have nothing but respect. He's an excellent student of mine. It was the light at the end of the tunnel. Naruto's self-growing hatred was repelled by the light of Iruka's statement. And as he spoke, the conviction in Iruka's words grew. He works with all his might, but sometimes, even so, he's awkward, clumsy, a screw-up. People have mocked and shunned him, and it's given him empathy. He knows what it is to be in pain. That boy is not your demon fox. He is a citizen of Konoha, Uzumaki Naruto. Tears of relief streaking down his face, Naruto silently sobbed, still hidden behind the tree some distance away. A scowl rose onto Mizuki's face. Ah, that's so sweet. Just hearing you say so makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. Iruka groaned in pain. His attack on Mizuki had worsened his wound. Mizuki readied his oversized shuriken. Well, Iruka, I had planned to save you for last, but sometimes things just don't work out the way you plan, so. Mizuki wound up to throw the shuriken, say goodbye. Resigned, Iruka lay there up against the tree, happy that his young student would at least survive. So this is it. But it wasn't. Mizuki was ambushed just as he was completing his throw. Landing between the injured Iruka and the downed Mizuki was Naruto. Keep away from Iruka-sensei, or I'll kill you. Stupid kid, should have stayed away. Loudmouth brat, I can kill you with one blow. Readying a hand sign, Naruto growled back, bring it on, you jerk. Anything you throw at me I'll throw back times 1,000. You're welcome to try, little fox. With a puff, hundreds, no thousands of clones of Naruto surrounded the trio from all directions in the forest. What? How did he? For the first time that night, Mizuki felt fear. What's the matter, tough guy? I thought you could kill me in one blow. Right, come on. Iruka was stunned. The student he had failed earlier in the day was capable of this. Well then, if you're not attacking, I guess I just have to. Mizuki attempted to fight back against the horde, valiantly putting up a fight and taking several dozen clones with him. It did not matter. There were too many, his energy could not last. All the abuse that Iruka-sensei had endured that night was repaid, no one touched one of Naruto's important people. When all was said and done, Mizuki's body lay there in a heap, battered, bloodied, and bruised. Hey, I guess I got carried away. Naruto, come here, I've got a present for you. Closing his eyes, Naruto felt his signature goggles be removed from his head, before they were replaced with something else. You can open your eyes now, Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes to his now hit-I-8-less teacher. Congratulations, Naruto. To celebrate your promotion, I'll take you out. We can go for ramen. Excitement overtaking his body, Naruto tackled his teacher, no, former teacher, in a bear hug. Naruto's apartment. The next day, Naruto woke up with a yawn. Sometimes a frown would appear on his face, before switching to a smile, then back to a frown again. His face was a myriad of expressions as yesterday's events came back to him. And when he caught a glimpse of the hit-I-8 on his nightstand, the frowns finally lost to the smiles for good. Getting up, he put on one of his orange jumpsuit, before tying the hit-I-8 around his head. It was official, he was a shinobi of the leaf. But his first day on the job was destined to be a boring one, as he would not be receiving his first assignment until the next day. So, with no rush to his movements, Naruto began to make himself breakfast as his mind drifted towards the conversation he'd had last night with Iruka over some ramen. I know you're stoked about becoming a ninja, Naruto, but keep in mind that this is only the first step in your journey as a ninja. Come on, Iruka-sensei, this is no time for one-year lectures. Naruto remembered turning to Iruka, only for his words to get caught in his throat when he saw the older man's grave expression. No, Naruto, this is actually the perfect time to talk about this. I know you work hard, and want to be the Hokage one day, and I have every confidence that you will, but only those who are still alive can accomplish their dreams. You beating Mizuki last night was impressive, but honestly speaking, he can't be considered as much stronger than your average genin. His promotion to Chunin was mainly from experience and time, rather than any amount of skill or talent. For the first time in his life, Naruto actually perked up to listen to one of Iruka's lectures, and it wasn't just because the man had said he had a shot at Hokage. But maybe I'm not the best person to hear this from, considering the man in question would have killed me if you weren't there to save me. That wasn't true. If he wasn't there to begin with, the two of them never would have fought to begin with. And even if they did fight, Naruto bet that Iruka was fully capable of dodging that initial attack provided he didn't need to push someone out of the way first. In any case, Mizuki and I are small fry in comparison to some of the other Chunin around, much less any ninja ranked higher. If you really want to reach the top like you're always claiming, half-baked jutsu won't cut it. And before you say anything, I know you have that shadow clone jutsu now, and I can't think of a single person better at transformations than you, but other than those two, you don't really have any other options. I've seen your taijutsu, and I've seen your shuriken jutsu, and I'll tell you now, most genin around are better than you at both. Naruto wanted to get offended, but realistically, despite the fact that he could somewhat go toe-to-toe with the likes of Sasuke, that was really a brawling style of fighting rather than proper taijutsu. And even then, technically speaking, he'd never beaten Sasuke. But he had gotten close. The point is that your basics are weak. And while some things like history or math aren't that important, especially when you're in the middle of a fight, you must remember that chakra is a mixture of both physical and spiritual energy. There's a reason we don't only focus on the combat arts in the academy, and by the time you're a chunin, it's expected that you've intensely studied at least one academic topic to maintain a good spiritual energy, even if it is not one of those taught in the academy. I know. But I just can't sit down and read those boring, old books. I get antsy, I can't sit still that long, and even if I do, they don't make sense anyways. Putting aside your lack of focus, which I know is not true, because I've seen the results of your pranks, why did you not come to me for extra help if things weren't making sense? Well, for one, I was told that as ninja, we're expected to figure things out on our own. And two, it would defeat the purpose of all that code breaking in the books if you just told me the answer. As the words left his mouth, he remembered seeing Iruka's expression go from intrigued, to angered, to horrified. And before the two parted, the older man had made him promise to meet with him the following day to continue talking about the topic. Snapping back to reality, Naruto checked the time, and realized that he had a little bit until the time he'd promised to meet Iruka at. And with nothing better to do, especially since he probably shouldn't try pranking anybody after the previous night's affairs, he decided to experiment with his new jutsu. Flashing through a couple of hand signs, Naruto summoned a clone in front of himself. I remember the scroll saying something about not being able to take hits. I wonder. X2. Without warning, both Narutos swung at each other, socking one another in the face. One was sent flying across the room, while the other poofed into a cloud of smoke. Left on the ground, groaning, Naruto thought to himself, shit, that hurt. Of course my clone would have the same idea as me, only that idiot didn't realize he was a clone. Sitting there for a moment in pain from being punched in the face, his own words eventually sank in. Clones could think. He thought they just did whatever he told them to do. And as he sat there thinking about what just happened, he realized his memories of the event were weird, as if had seen them from two different places. But that wasn't possible. He was one guy, and the clone was the other. Unless. I could have totally used this to get answers on all the tests this year. All I'd have to do is somehow tell the clone what the question was, then it could look up the answer and pop itself, and boom. Naruto the ace student. Wallowing in despair at the missed opportunity, Naruto soon got back up. Rubbing his still sore cheek, he began to plot. Welp, the past is in the past. More importantly, I wonder what else these clones can do. Curiosity engaged, Naruto summoned another couple clones, which all immediately sat down and began to brainstorm with him. Not quite used to thinking about jutsu logically, Naruto had no clue what to do or what to consider when testing the limits of his jutsu. Luckily, he wasn't alone. One of his clones soon stood up, and flashed through a series of hand signs, transforming into Iruka. Simultaneously, each Naruto looked shocked, as they shouted in unison, clones can use jutsu, too. The original also began to regret that he hadn't read more on what the clones were capable of while he'd had the scroll. But not one for regrets, such thoughts were soon replaced with nefarious plots and pranks in his, and his clones' minds. An infectious laughter had already begun to spread throughout the room. To the original, more importantly than any of that, was the meeting with Iruka that he'd be late for if he did not leave immediately. So, scrambling out of his apartment, he left his clones with a very short-sighted and simple order: find something to do while I'm gone. He didn't specify what we had to do, right? Unbeknownst to the village, a plague in the color orange was soon to befall the village. Iruka was seated in his office at the academy, deep in thought. A pile of books lay before him on his desk, and he would periodically pick one up, browse through it, write something down, and then go back to thinking. A plan was forming in his mind, and on the paper before him. And as said plan was reaching completion, the door to his office swung open with a resounding bang. The culprit could only be the one standing in the now open doorway, Naruto Uzumaki. Reporting as promised, Iruka-sensei. Naruto saluted, back perfectly straight. Unable to contain himself, Iruka let his laughter burst out at Naruto's antics, as he motioned for the boy to sit in the chair across from him. As his breath settled, the older man suppressed the grin on his face, wanting to maintain a certain air of dignity for the rather serious business before them. Naruto, I appreciate your serious attitude, but the saluting and whatnot is not necessary. Nonsense. I am an official ninja of Konoha, everything is serious, and thus saluting is a necessity. Once again, Iruka began to laugh despite himself. He'd wanted this meeting to be serious, but the sight of Naruto at the moment was anything but that to him, despite the boy's earnestness. And it didn't help that Naruto was right there beside him, laughing along as well. Taking a moment to calm themselves, Naruto opened up the conversation. So anyway, what's up, Iruka-sensei? What did ya want to see me for today? Could it be that you miss your star pupil already? Can't say I'd blame ya. Chuckling to himself at his joke, Naruto was surprised. Iruka was no longer laughing along. Looking up at his face, Naruto found Iruka's face grave. Worried, Naruto forced himself to match the older man's intensity, as he focused on how Iruka would respond to his question. Bowing his head, Iruka apologized. Naruto, on behalf of the academy, I apologize. We have failed you. Confused by the sudden apology, Naruto was silent for a moment before replying, I don't know why you're apologizing, Iruka-sensei. If it's about last night with Mizuki, then. No, Naruto, this time it's not about Mizuki. It's about what we talked about last night. Specifically, I'm talking about you having trouble with assigned readings. Still confused, what do you mean, Iruka-sensei? It's my fault for not learning to read the code properly. Nothing you or the academy can be blamed for, really. Naruto, there are two things wrong with what you just said. For one, it is the job of the academy, and by extension myself and every other teacher, to ensure that our students are able to learn the material, regardless of if said material is related to codes. And two, the academy has never assigned code-based work to its students. That's the type of work that you get introduced to later on as a genin, or more likely than that, as a chunin. On the one hand, Naruto trusted his teacher. On the other hand, he'd seen the assignments with his own two eyes, and while said eyes weren't on the level of a Hyuga's, he did not think they were bad enough for him to be mistaken about this. What do you mean, Iruka-sensei? I saw the codes with my own eyes, and I heard the stuff about ninjas solving problems on their own with my own ears. And while tests weren't entirely written in code, so I could answer some questions, there was definitely still some code on them. Resigned, and looking almost sad at this point, Iruka sighed, before continuing his explanation. You'll understand what I'm saying quicker if I just show you with an example. Picking a book from his desk at random, Iruka flipped to a random page, before handing it over to Naruto. Read the first sentence on that page to me, Naruto. Naruto, taking a look at the book, stammered out a few words. The chakra pathway is enmeshed within the poti. Hearing enough, Iruka took the book back from Naruto, reading aloud the sentence he was meant to read. The chakra pathway is enmeshed within the body, transporting chakra through the body and each organ as the circulatory system does blood. Well, of course you can read it, Iruka-sensei. You know how to read code. That's not a fair comparison. This proves nothing. The sadness in Iruka's eyes magnified, before he said, Naruto, this book is not written in code. Countless thoughts suddenly started racing through Naruto's mind before landing on one question, what do you mean it isn't written in code? Naruto, the reason why I'm apologizing to you is the same reason as why you think this book, and many others, are written in code, and also why I apologize to you to begin with. It's likely you have multiple things affecting your ability to read, and to be honest, the older man suddenly turned to Naruto, has anyone ever taught you how to read? I mean one-on-one, outside of the academy. No, why? Iruka ran his hands over his face, before stopping at his brow to massage his temples. He'd been thinking that was the case ever since the conversation last night, but a part of him had hoped that Naruto had been avoiding homework and reading out of a distaste for the subjects, rather than a lack of ability. It was obvious now, looking back, but an orphan in his particular situation should have received extra attention early on, as that might have made all the difference in his attitude towards his academics. And the worst part of it all was that there was yet another thing contributing to Naruto's difficulties with reading, one that would have been caught if he'd done any one-on-one reading with an adult or a teacher. Well, if you had, what I'm about to tell you would have been caught a lot sooner than just now. Naruto did not appreciate the foreboding implication behind that line. It's likely that you have dyslexia. What that means is that when you try to read, sometimes certain letters and words get unconsciously mixed up in your mind, making them far more difficult to read than for other people. Defeated, Naruto asked, kind of like they're written in code. In your particular case, yes, like they're written in code. The room went silent. Naruto at first appearing sullen and confused, before suddenly going wide-eyed as he thought of something. Iruka just sat and watched these emotions develop on his former pupil's face. Is there a cure? Unfortunately, Naruto, no, there is not a cure. Once again, the room went silent, both teacher and pupil sitting in thought, with Naruto's sullen mood returning. Breaking the silence, look, Naruto. There's not a lot of information on your condition, as it is in no way common, so I cannot be entirely sure on how to help you, but rest assured, I do want to help you. Naruto was still silent, looking down, lost in thought. Iruka picked up the piece of paper he had been writing on prior to Naruto's arrival. With that being said, I have come up with a plan that might work. Or at least, even if it doesn't work entirely, it should help you a ton. That caught Naruto's attention, naturally drawing his eyes to the paper in Iruka's hand. Motioning, he signaled for Iruka to continue. You see, there are 3 main components to it. 1. Meet up with me once a week for some practice reading. Naruto struggled to hold back tears. Iruka was willing to waste time once a week helping him. He hated reading, but just the thought of spending time with one of his close ones was encouraging enough to make him willing to do it. 2. A lot of reading by yourself. You know what they say, practice makes perfect, and you'll need a lot of extra practice. And lastly, 3. I want you to document your experiences with dyslexia, what you do to help with it, what works, what doesn't. Every last bit should be written down. Those first 2 make sense, but what is the point of the documentation? How does that help me? As if he could hear Naruto's thoughts, Iruka continued, I believe you understand why the first 2 components are so important, but you probably have your doubts about the third, right? Hearing Iruka's question, Naruto quickly nodded his head. The third is just as important as the first 2 components. Its purpose is twofold, the first being practice with writing, and through reading your own writing, I am hoping it will help make others' writing easier to read. After all, regardless of whether a word you write down looks strange, you will know what it means, so it should be easier for your brain to puzzle back together. The first point made a lot of sense to Naruto, and it made him curious about Iruka's second point. The second is that I hope that by recording your experience with your condition, that we can use it to help others with it in the future. Think of it this way, the words you write down today regarding your troubles could one day save someone else in the same situation you're finding yourself in now. Hearing the second point, a cheeky grin rose up on Naruto's face, as he said, I'd be a hero. Nodding in agreement, Iruka replied, you'd be a hero. With a quick fist pump into the air, Naruto leapt across Iruka's desk, hugging his once again teacher. Returning the hug, Iruka calmed Naruto down before seating him to begin the first session of reading practice. In a tree. Same day. Operative Lone Orange reporting in. Do you copy? Over. Loud and clear, Operative. What do you have to report? Over. The zone I'm watching swaps guards every hour. There is a gap of 1 minute and 37 seconds between guards. Over. When is the next swap? Over. In exactly 10 minutes. Over. Excellent. Be ready. Reinforcements will arrive in cat form in 9 minutes. Be ready, you're the leader of this operation. Over and out. Copy that. Over and out. A soul clone of Naruto was skillfully blending in with the tree he was sat in. Superhuman levels of patience were engaged, as far as Naruto is concerned. The zone he was in charge of was the Anbu headquarters. Waiting for several more minutes, the Naruto clone transformed into an orange cat, before jumping down from the tree he was in and merging in with a newly arrived group of black cats. Gradually creeping closer to their target, the group of cats, led by the orange cat, waited patiently for their time to strike. Suddenly, a shadowy figure flashed down from a roof near the Anbu headquarters, before merging in with the passing pedestrians, and walking off. It was time to strike. The group of cats rushed forward, jumping in unison at a wall, before turning into mice midair, and landing inside of a drainage pipe. Rapidly crawling up through the drainage pipe, they arrived on the roof of the Anbu headquarters. Using their now miniature forms, they crawled beneath the door, before descending into the headquarters. Rapidly navigating through the intentionally confusing design of the building, they soon found what they were looking for, the locker room. In and out in less than 5 seconds, it was a record for Naruto. And the same way they came in, the group of mice left. Soon reaching the ground again, they scattered, careful to not leave a trail behind. The job was a success. Operative Lone Orange dodged into a bathroom, before re-emerging not as a mouse, but as a brown-haired boy. Grinning to himself, he hurried towards Ichiraku's for some ramen. He had to make it there before the other successful operatives got the same idea after their jobs. Returning to his apartment, smile on his face, Naruto ignored the glares from the surrounding villagers. His lesson for the day with Iruka had actually gone great, despite his dislike for reading. Opening the door to his apartment, he immediately slammed the door shut, stopping for a moment to think, before slowly opening it again to confirm what he had seen. And just like the first time he opened his door, the sight before him was unbelievable. His apartment was clean. No, that was an understatement, it was spotless. It was never clean, much less this clean, which led to his obvious surprise at the situation. Entering into his apartment, Naruto soon found himself face to face with several clones, each holding several radios. Even as he walked close to the sight before him, he could hear conversations happening, not only between the clones in the room, but also to presumably other clones on the other side of the radios. A lot of questions emerged in Naruto's mind. Where did all these radios come from? Why was the apartment so clean? But most importantly, what are y'all doing? Instantly, all the Naruto clones' heads snapped in his direction. Their faces were painted with various forms of panic and worry, before quickly becoming relieved seeing it was just the original. Who was in charge of watching the door? What if someone else had walked in? Several clones chimed, "Not me," before one sheepishly raised his hand, "I was." Several groans emerged, before the clone who had asked the question just pointed towards the door. Nodding his head in acceptance, the guilty clone passed by Naruto, before sitting in front of the door and staring. The questioning clone quickly flashed through the hand signs for, creating a clone that promptly walked over to Naruto. "I'm sure you're curious. The head clone made me to catch you up to speed." Head clone. "Yeah, head clone. He was in charge of everything while you were gone. We drew lots, he won, he's the leader. But that's beside the point. He's the one who split us up into the communications squad, the recon squad, and the extra hands squad, which was formerly the cleaning squad." This confused Naruto. He remembered telling the clones to find something to do, but this wasn't exactly what he had in mind, whatever it was that was happening. "Wait a minute, what's this about squads? I get the communications squad, it's these guys with the radios. But what about the recon and extra hands squads? What are they doing besides the cleaning?" Already expecting that question, the clone was ready with the answer. "Well, while you weren't here to vote for the head clone, you also weren't here for the, what should we do? Vote. We decided on 1, cleaning up the apartment, cause let's be real, it was kind of filthy. And 2, pull the mother of all pranks, what could be our final, big one, being as we are about to be officials ninjas starting tomorrow, might not have time, ya know." The picture was complete in Naruto's mind. What were a group of clones of him supposed to do with their free time? One only needs to ask themselves, what would Naruto do? To get the answer. And it came down to 2 options, eat ramen, or pull a prank. Considering that eating ramen did not take long, that really left one option for the group, pull a prank. The problem being it of course had to be a prank large enough to satisfy all the Narutos and let each one contribute. When Naruto had left the apartment, he had left behind 7 clones. Considering there were 8 clones in his apartment at the moment, with the head clone having just made a new one in front of him, who knows how many clones were out around the city at the moment with that many radios being needed. The thought of the ensuing chaos and hilarity brought a grin to his face. It was a new note in his mind regarding the capabilities of his clones. Large, hands-free pranks could be done. And as he thought about it more, they couldn't even be linked back to him as long as he had a solid alibi. After all, how could he possibly be in 2 places at once? Moving up to the table, the head clone naturally deferred the head position to the original. So, what do we got cooking? Murmurs began to resound, as the clones began to talk over one another. Naruto calmly raised his hand, silencing them, before he turned to the head clone. Head clone, explain please, if you don't mind. Smiling, certainly, boss. It's quite simple. We've planned out glitter bombs, paint sprays, stink bombs, you name it, we got it. We brought out every classic. What makes this different, however, is who we've targeted this time. Who are we targeting that is so different? That's thing, we're going after everyone, simultaneously. The Anbu, the Akamichis, the Naras, the Yamanakas, every clan in Konoha, minor and major will be getting hit with something today. Won't we get in a lot of trouble for all this? Smile growing wider, the head clone innocently replied, but how could it possibly have been little old Naruto? He spent the entire duration of the incident with his former teacher, Iruka. Naruto silently beat himself up. He had just thought of using his clones to conduct pranks while he found himself an alibi. He just hadn't considered that it would be implemented before he had even thought of it. Of course, once people learn that we can use clones to pull pranks while we are elsewhere, they'll probably get mad at us again, but by then it'll be far too late. Breaking out into a laugh, the head clone returned his attention to the table, where the rest of the clones were waiting patiently. Naruto naturally turned his head to the clones as well, looking at them with a questioning glance. Is it done? The head clone asked. All the clones promptly replied, done. Catching on, Naruto grinned to himself, well then, I guess it's time to sit back and watch the fireworks. In unison, the Naruto clones left the apartment, before climbing up to the roof to wait for the results of their operation. Naruto's apartment. Morning. As Naruto woke up, he groggily felt around his body, touching each spot that he'd been hurt the night before. Fortunately, most of the injuries had healed overnight, leaving nothing that would inhibit him in the first day of his duties as a ninja. Getting out of bed, he tossed some bread in his toaster, before making his way to his bathroom to wash his face off. Taking a moment to look in the mirror, he noticed that the cut above his left eye was already beginning to scar. With his attention grabbed, he started to look at his face from various angles, before dejectedly muttering to himself, at least the scar doesn't look that bad. If anything, maybe it makes me a little more handsome. Done in the bathroom, he returned to getting ready for the day, all the while thinking back on the aftermath of yesterday's prank. Naruto and his clones had been sitting on the roof of his apartment for roughly 20 minutes before the first shouts roared throughout the village. As if it were a ritual, cries of, Naruto, and, that damned brat, were amongst the majority. As time went on, more and more screams erupted from around the village as each clan began to fall into the pranks that were left for them. One would think that Naruto would hide, or begin to run, but as part of the game, in his own mind, he would wait for the first person to show up before he began his escape. Naruto and his clones were growing more restless by the second, as they'd only really pranked one clan at a time in the past. Thus, they were starting to feel uncomfortable as they realized the scale of the resulting chase that would ensue. Even so, none of them budged. It would feel like cheating if they had left ahead of time. At least they could take comfort in their numbers, that is, until one of the clones let out an, oh shit. That naturally gathered the group's attention. As they turned to him, he quickly said, our alibi won't mean a thing if they see all us clones. Immediately popping himself as soon as he finished the words. If what he said didn't get through to them, the rush of memories quickly did, as each clone popped themselves. In one instant, Naruto was once again alone. Wincing from the sudden influx of memories, Naruto began to chuckle to himself at some of the more comedic moments in the memories, before getting himself ready to run. Just in time, too, as a shoe flew past his head, narrowly missing him as he ducked out of reflex. Spotting the culprit out of the corner of his eye, an angry mother of the Kurama clan, Naruto leapt into motion. Quickly scaling the fence on the edge of the roof of his apartment, Naruto jumped down to lower roof nearby. The moment his feet were about to touch the roof, already bracing himself to land, Naruto was suddenly kicked from the side by an angry Hyuga clansman. Unexpectedly launched in a different direction, Naruto quickly grabbed onto the edge of the roof before he fell off to the ground. Seeing several more Hyuga clansmen charge at him across the roof, he abandoned any thought of staying. He braced himself against the building next to the one he was dangling from and slid down between the two of them into the alley below. Upon reaching the ground, he heard shouts, "The brats in the alleyway. Cover both entrances, don't let him escape." Thinking fast, he transformed into a rat, and crawled back up to the roof through a drainage pipe for the gutters. He could hear his pursuers trying to figure out where he was hiding down below, and as panicked as he was growing, he was starting to lose it. Luckily, the experiences of all his previous chases guided him, as he patiently peeked out from his spot in the gutter to see if the roof was clear. There was a single Hyuga clansman still left on the roof, fortunately, not one using the weird eye technique they liked to use when chasing him. While his back was still turned, he scampered off, sneaking behind him, before transforming back into his normal form to make the jump to the next building. As he flew over the gap between the two buildings, he heard from below, "I see him, I see the brat. He's hopping between the rooftops." Once again, the intense pursuit was on. Rolling upon landing on the other roof, Naruto dodged several thrown objects, before jumping into the air to dodge yet another volley. Grinning from his successful escape thus far, a rock smashed into the side of his head. Dazed, and with blood gushing out, covering his left eye, Naruto quickly began to move once more, ignoring the particularly dangerous force that was employed in his capture. Suddenly much more serious than before, Naruto jumped off the roof he was on, transforming into a rat midair, and flying into an apartment through an open window. Rubbing the blood out of his eye as he undid his transformation, he calmly made his way through the apartment and out the front door, being careful to lock it again behind him. Temporarily, he had lost his pursuers. Taking a moment to collect himself, unsure of why they were being so hostile this time around, Naruto adjusted his headband, using it to cover the gash above his eye and keep the blood out of his face. Needing some help this time around, Naruto created a clone, which upon forming, instantly popped, updating any of his remaining clones as to the situation he was in. Readying himself, Naruto jumped off the apartment building's veranda, and was once again, instantly spotted. Landing on the street below, he was surrounded by ninja from various clans. Already prepared for this, Naruto quickly flashed through the hand signs for the shadow clone jutsu, intentionally performing it wrong, and creating a massive cloud of smoke. All the failed attempts at the technique that night before Iruka had found a surprising use, as an impromptu smoke creation technique. Transforming into one of the ninja who had surrounded him, Naruto carefully made his way out of the encirclement while the ninja were distracted. Fortunately, none of them were Anbu or a Hyuga, as both groups had methods to deal with such vision denial tricks. Casually making his way into a nearby alleyway, Naruto once again undid his transformation to kickstart the pursuit once more. Dashing out of the alleyway, Naruto was instantly subdued by an Anbu that had been lying in wait. Taken completely by surprise, Naruto had no way of resisting, especially when the Anbu normally went easy on him, like it was a game. "Hey, what's the deal? That was so anticlimactic. Listen to me, Uzumaki Naruto. We'd like to continue the game just as much as you do, but we can't this time. Unfortunately, some bad elements have slipped into the pursuit this time, as we're sure you are aware. So, the chase ends here." Resigned, Naruto nodded his head, agreeing that the chase this time seemed more dangerous than usual. "Wait a minute, we? Who's we?" Upon saying those words, Naruto was suddenly acutely aware that he was surrounded by 3 agents of the Anbu, all sporting colorful masks. Now if you'll come with us, we are to keep you safe while the various clans calm down. Naruto had been forcibly taken into Anbu custody for his safety. Finished with his breakfast, and with his signature orange jumpsuit on, Naruto left to the academy to figure out his assignment. He hoped he would get paired with Sakura, or maybe someone he knew at the very least, like Shino. He didn't really have any hopes of having Shikamaru or Choji on his team with the next iteration of the Ino-Shika-Cho formation on the way. Ducking through a couple alleyways, including one he had passed through the day before, Naruto arrived back at the academy in a short amount of time. Making his way to the room where their assignments would be given out, Naruto found himself in an almost empty room. For one of the first times in his life outside of pranks, Naruto had been one of the earliest students to the school. He calmly made his way to seat, and sat down, intent on peacefully waiting. After the previous day, he was still pretty tired, and he found himself slowly dozing off. Some time passed, and he heard his classmates enter the room every now and then. He only got up after quite some time had passed, and not really of his own volition. Choji had entered the room, bag of chips in hand, with Shikamaru following slowly behind. Scanning the room, Choji spotted some open seats for the two, only they were next to something interesting. Naruto. Didn't Naruto fail the test? Why is he here? Shrugging to himself, only one way to find out. Come on Shikamaru, I see some open seats next to Naruto over there. Speaking of which, didn't he fail the final test? Shikamaru opened his half-closed eyes, intrigued. Naruto had failed his test. Why would he be here? Don't know. Curious. Only one way to find out. Taking the lead this time, Shikamaru walked over to where Naruto was sleeping, with Choji tagging along. Sitting in a seat next to Naruto, Shikamaru waited, not willing to disturb another man's slumber, even to fulfill his own curiosity. Fortunately, he would not have to wait long, as shortly after he sat down, Iruka entered the room. Walking to the front of the class, Iruka started, "You all know why you're here, so I won't waste your time." As curious as he was, the assignment was more important, so Shikamaru forced himself to look forward, and pay attention to what Iruka was saying. Team 7 will be comprised of Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Kurama Daisuke under the leadership of Jonin Hatake Kakashi. Team 8 will be comprised of Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, and Aburame Shino under the leadership of Jonin Yuhi Kurenai. Team 9 is still under use. Team 10 will be comprised of Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Choji under the leadership of Jonin Sarutobi Asuma. Wait here for your Jonin instructors. That will be all. Not surprised with who he was teamed with, although he was a bit curious about his Jonin instructor, Shikamaru went to talk with Choji to pass the time. Just as Shikamaru opened his mouth, Iruka left the room while saying, "Oh, and Naruto, come with me for your assignment." Remembering why he and Choji had specifically sat down next to Naruto, Shikamaru snapped his head around to talk to Naruto before he left. Only to be left in a stupor, as he caught sight of what appeared to be a massive scar beneath Naruto's headband. Not able to ask his question out of astonishment, Shikamaru watched as Naruto left the room to follow Iruka. Naruto entered Iruka's office, following right behind him. Thoughts were racing through his mind the entire walk over. Why didn't I hear my name before? Was my graduation rejected? Does it not count for some reason? Maybe it's punishment for stealing the scroll. Or for the prank yesterday. But before Naruto could dig up every crime or transgression he had committed within the past year, Iruka broke him out of his thoughts, and calmed him down with one sentence. Don't worry Naruto, you are still a genin, that won't change. Relief washed over Naruto, that was the biggest worry he had, resolved, in one sentence. The reason why you're here talking to me is for another reason. And honestly, as your teacher and friend, a part of me wishes your graduation was rejected. A look of betrayal now emerged on his face. Iruka had been the one to give him the pass, why would he say something like that? Especially now. What? Why would you say that, Iruka-sensei? I know how it sounds but let me explain. It's because your assignment. My assignment? Naruto didn't quite understand, he hadn't received an assignment. Wait a minute, if I graduated, and am officially a genin, why was I not assigned a jonin instructor? Naruto waited for Iruka to explain. No matter what he thought of, it probably wouldn't be right. Naruto, your promotion to genin was a field promotion. Essentially, your promotion was not through normal avenues. Not through normal avenues. That does not sound good. So, I'm still a genin, anyhow. Right, why does that matter? Taking a moment to think, Iruka explained, you know how each group of genin is split into a 3-man cell with a jonin as their instructor. Yeah, there are no other genin to pair you with. And since a squad with a single jonin and genin would be unbalanced, it would be inefficient for you to be paired with one. Naruto did not like where this was going. Naruto, you're now considered a roaming genin, not a part of any squad. Internally, Naruto was screaming, what does that mean? What does that mean? Trying to stay calm, Naruto stammered out, then what I am gonna do? Who is gonna train me? Iruka then told Naruto the best news he heard that day. Well, it's not all bad. Have you ever heard of the Eternal Genin? He's offered to teach you the ropes. The discussions about new laws and old laws had finally ceased, marking what would normally be the end of the biweekly meeting of clan heads. Although tedious, Hiruzen knew the value of these discussions in preventing unrest and keeping the various clans under control. They needed a place to regularly voice their opinion to the Hokage, and it gave them hope in influencing the politics and policies of the village. It also served as an excellent ground to establish market dealings with other clans, as well as planning out the intermingling of the clan heirs. But Hiruzen's age was getting to him, it had gradually become harder to focus during the meetings, and at every one he would fantasize about retiring once more. This meeting, however, he found himself easily able to focus during. Not out of a renewed vigor, but instead due to the mission he was to complete by the end of the meeting. Clearing his throat, the moderator spoke, well then, if no one else has an object to discuss during today's meeting, I will officially close this day's bi-weekly meeting. Coughing, Hiruzen interrupted the moderator before he could finish. Yes, Honorable Hokage-sama. The attention of the various clan leaders was now on him. Used to the pressure from years of service as Hokage, Hiruzen calmly spoke. I believe that we should discuss young Uzumaki Naruto's pranks, being that every clan was involved in yesterday's mayhem, including my own. Several clan leaders nodded their heads at Hiruzen's suggestion. Hiruzen thought to himself that the clan leaders nodding their heads along to his suggestion must be thinking, the old bat finally says something relevant to my clan. Internally laughing at his joke, Hiruzen waited for the moderator to carry out the vote on whether to discuss the topic at the day's meeting. It was more of a formality really, as it would be political suicide to vote against discussing a topic brought up by the Hokage. The moderator waited a moment for the vote to occur, before announcing, by my count, it seems the vote was unanimous. Well then, let the discussion of Uzumaki Naruto's pranks on the clans begin. The Kurama clan head was the first to speak out. I for one think the boy should be punished for his actions. He is a genin now, is he not? Such behavior is not very becoming of a ninja of Konoha, as fresh as he may be. Another clan head responded, are you sure that's your own opinion talking? Or is it just that you are afraid of your wife's reaction if you don't speak out against the boy? Several clan heads laughed at the obvious joke, shortly quieting down to let the discussion continue. Next the Anabe clan head spoke, honestly, regardless of our opinions as the heads of our clans, what matters is what our clansmen think. My clan, for one, was furious over yesterday's spectacle, and as their spokesman, I am forced to vote for punishing the boy. That was a point the majority of the clan heads could agree with, it was their job to seek punishment for the boy. Furthermore, I fear that if we do not punish the boy in some way, our clansmen may take it into their own hands. While I can stop them from physically harming the boy, that won't stop them from finding others way to hurt him or interfere with his duties as a shinobi. The momentum of the meeting was tilting towards the punishment of Naruto, something Hiruzen did not want to see happen. His objective in the meeting that day was to protect the young boy, and it was looking increasingly unlikely that that would happen. An unexpected helper soon came to Hiruzen's aid and completely flipped the meeting's momentum on its head. That helper came in the form of Hyuga Hiyashi. I, for one, would like to see the young boy's talents used to benefit the village. Instantly, all murmurs and discussions went silent. The second most powerful man in the village had spoken out in favor of Naruto, much to the surprise of all the clan heads gathered, Hiruzen included. Hiyashi was a serious man and seemed the type to possess a zero-tolerance policy when it came to such foolish actions such as pranks. It made one curious, what did he see that the other clan heads had overlooked? The Kurama clan head, ever outspoken, naturally asked, "What do you mean? What talents? Pranking people and getting off scot-free?" Smugness in his eyes, Hiyashi continued, "Well, for one, although this cannot be confirmed to be directly linked to the boy and his pranks, one of my younger clansmen had been having trouble activating his Byakugan for the first time." Pausing for a moment, as if to draw out the suspense, that is, until he attempted to activate it after having participated in the chase of the Uzumaki boy. Gasps of shock thundered from around the room. The information was shocking to the point of disrupting the clan heads' level heads. The strongest clan in Konoha could potentially be able to activate their famed dojutsu through chasing a freshly graduated genin. It was unbelievable. And naturally there were voices who spoke out against the idea. That could just be a coincidence. Don't you Hyuga train since childhood to activate your Byakugan? It's probably just the accumulated effort of your clansmen finally coalescing, allowing them to break through at long last. Hiruzen thought to himself, be that as it may. The possibility that something about Naruto and his chases acting as a catalyst in activating dojutsu is critical for the village to look into. The possibility alone should be enough for him to avoid any punishment. Mood improving, Hiruzen continued listening, ready to jump in if the discussion once again turned against his young protege. His worry, however, was not needed, as soon Akamichi Choza spoke up. While not fully credible, the possibility should still be looked into, and that should be enough for the boy to avoid any punishment. However, more importantly than that possibility, is the tangible talents that the boy possesses. Cooperating with his longtime friend, Yamanaka Inoichi followed up, yes, I agree. The boy clearly displays an almost unnatural level of talent in escaping pursuits, subterfuge, and trapping. And the final blow of the trio, the Jonin commander of Konoha, Nara Shikaku continued, can someone explain how a mere genin sneaks into every clan compound, including the Hyugas, and sets up various pranks, which could have been traps, all whilst completely avoiding detection? That thought process got the clan heads thinking, and sweating. How did the boy do it? In one day no less. If that weren't enough, the Kurama clan head unintentionally piled on when he muttered, didn't all those pranks go off at the same time as well? What if they had been traps? Half the clan ninja in the village would be dead or injured. Suddenly the room was silent again, and as the Kurama clan head raised his head to see why, he found himself at the center of attention. Realizing that he had accidentally spoken aloud, he used the opportunity created by his blunder to continue speaking, hoping to garner some form of reputation. The end result is that the boy is dangerous, even ignoring his role as you-know-what. It remains to be seen whether the threat he poses will be towards other villages, or ourselves. It was time for Hiruzen to speak up before the conversation once more turned against Naruto. I have no doubt in my mind, as Hokage, that the boy will not turn his back on Konoha. The attention of the room once more turned towards the Hokage, who had been silent the entire meeting, save for introducing the current topic of discussion. Lord Hokage, how can you be sure? We've already established the boy's talents in the field of subterfuge. It is not a stretch to say he would be able to hide his intentions. The Kurama clan head, as young as he was, had been rather vocal in the day's meeting. Already, he had spoken out against Naruto not once, but twice. Hiruzen was not surprised. The young clan head had only risen to his position following the Nine Tails attack. Once more, however, an unforeseen ally spoke in favor of Naruto. At the very least, the Uzumaki has never been observed retaliating against his fellow villager, despite being the subject of all manners of abuse during each chase following one of his pranks. Hiyashi, Hiruzen questioned, clearly hinting for him to continue. Ignoring previous chases, in the one that occurred yesterday, I have heard from my clansman that the boy had been seen bleeding from his head. Evidently, someone had found it acceptable to injure the boy. Even so, the boy still employed non-aggressive methods of escaping capture. As far as I am aware, none of those who pursued him had so much as a bruise. Once again, the Hyuga clan leader had brought up a point no one had thought of, or at least, mentioned. It left the various clan heads lost in thought, trying to remember a case that would disprove what was said. Hiruzen saw his opportunity and pressed his advantage. Based on reports from the Anbu, Naruto has endured the jeers and harassment from the village for years now. And while he has fought back in some cases, it was not anything lethal, with him losing most, if not all, of those fights. In reality, the worst thing he's done is his pranks. With the two most powerful men in the room having now directly spoken for his rather lack of aggression, the clan head stopped trying to think of a way to refute the point. Even the Kurama clan head was silent. The silence was broken by the Inabe clan head. Well then, let's suppose the boy is totally loyal to the village, why don't we then use him for the talents he has displayed? The boy is too young to participate in the sabotage and subterfuge efforts of the village. The Inabe clan head answered, "You're thinking in the wrong direction. What if we use him not to exploit the weaknesses of other villages, but instead to improve on the weaknesses of our own? He could, at the very least, point out the ways he entered each one of our clan compounds undetected, allowing us to fix those gaps in our defenses." Voices broke out, as various clan heads began to speak over one another, arguing about who would get to employ the boy's services first. Silence. Hiruzen shouted, silencing the room. The village will employ young Naruto as a counter-infiltration specialist, and those who wish to see their clan compound's defenses tightened will have to go through the village to hire his services. There was a pause, before he continued, "Am I clear? No one is to directly bother the boy and interfere with his duties." The room chorused a, "Yes, Lord Hokage." Hiruzen kept pushing. "Now, if we will continue the matter at hand." Hiyashi mentioned possible improvements in one of his clan members following yesterday's chase. Can any clan head think of anything similar regarding the members of their clan? Each clan leader began to comb through their memories, searching for anything that jumped out at them. The Kurama clan head was the first one to speak up, surprisingly, in favor of Naruto. As much as I hate to admit it, comparing the response of my clansmen each time we've been pranked, there is a noticeable improvement in one aspect. Speed of mobilization. The Inabe clan head nodded along. I'm in agreement. While I cannot speak for other clans, my clansmen have improved in a similar manner. From the first prank, to yesterday's, my clansmen time spent to mobilize in pursuit of the boy has almost halved. Every clan head began to nod along, as their clans too, had improved in that aspect. They also all understood the importance. If an invasion were to occur, this response time could save the village a lot of hurt. I have something else to add. The Ishida clan head spoke. My son, who is a genin and regularly participates in the pursuit of the Uzumaki boy, holds the record for the fastest capture of Tora. That was shocking news. Tora was practically a ninja cat, having escaped its owner so many times, that it was considered an expert in avoiding detection and evading pursuit. For that reason, the mission to capture Tora was considered a high-value one by the village, as it trained genin's teamwork and capture skills. It seemed like Naruto could serve a similar purpose, in training his pursuers, except to an even higher degree than that of Tora. It seems that it is important that these chases continue to happen. The question is, how do we continue them, while lowering the aggression pointed towards the boy? Inoichi had asked a difficult question. Several minutes passed with no clear answers given. Sensing that more time would not help, at least, not more time in the meeting hall, Hiruzen moved to conclude the meeting. Perhaps, that is a question for his clan heads to think about between now and the next meeting. We've already spent plenty of time talking about young Naruto and his escapades. It could also be a question that requires us to discuss with our clansmen to find a solution. Agreement spread throughout the hall, as the mediator once again concluded the meeting, only this time, no one interrupted him. A smiling Hiruzen left the meeting hall to return home, thinking to himself, maybe your dreams aren't so far-fetched, Naruto. It seems like those who are influential in the village are slowly coming to support you, even if they don't realize it yet. Ninja Academy. Morning. As Naruto arrived at the academy and began looking around for the man he was supposed to meet with, he was approached by a rather old figure sporting a large pan on his back. Before Naruto could open his mouth, the old man spoke. Hello young man, I am Maruboshi Kosuke, also known as the Eternal Genin. If I'm not wrong, you must be Naruto, correct? Nodding his head, Naruto remembered Iruka's warning from the day before. Although the man before him was referred to as the Eternal Genin, he was not to look down on him. Despite his looks and title, the man was widely considered to be one of the strongest ninja in the village. His age also showed his experience, having had served as a genin for 50-some years. Iruka had forcibly ingrained respect for the man into Naruto and made sure to emphasize the volume of information he could learn from him. And so, Naruto remained calm and collected. Contrary to popular belief, Naruto excelled at keeping calm. After all, it was an invaluable asset when pranking others, and when needing to tolerate the villagers' abuse towards him. It was especially easy when it was in front of someone he actually had respect for. Kosuke was surprised. The Naruto before him looked nothing like the rumors portrayed him. Sure, the orange jumpsuit was present, but not the over-energetic and childish attitude that was expected. That was part of the reason why he had asked whether he was talking to Naruto, not stated. You're not quite what I was expecting, sir. Well, we can treat this as a first lesson of sorts, I suppose. I'm sure you are aware that part of a shinobi's duties is information gathering, including rumors and the like. Naruto was aware that shinobi needed to gather information, however, he wasn't aware that rumors were involved. Rumors weren't really reliable information, after all, so why would a shinobi waste their time with them? Yeah, I get that we are supposed to gather info, but aren't rumors like, super unreliable? Why bother with them? It was a good question, once again surprising Kosuke. Naruto was supposed to be a poor student. One wouldn't think that a poor student would be particularly adept at asking questions. It could be a fluke, but Kosuke noted it down in his mind, hoping to ascertain with time whether or not the boy was actually stupid, like the rumors had also suggested. Good question. Let's think about it for a moment and use you as an example. Me. Naruto couldn't really see how he would serve as a good example of rumors, but he let the man continue, certain he must have some sort of point. Why else would he bring it up? Yes, you. Before our meeting today, I conducted some information gathering about you. If I was to be ready to teach you, I had to know more about you. That information gathering naturally included rumors about you. Naruto had already been paying attention to the man, but that really grabbed his attention. What were the rumors about him saying? And what were those rumors? Sensing the young boy's interest and growing excitement, Kosuke continued, that you were a young brat who liked to wear an obnoxious, orange jumpsuit. That you loved to pull pranks and were the bottom of your class. That you were loud and childish. Naruto looked almost hurt. He thought the man was going to discuss the rumors about him, not outright insult him and his sense of fashion. Such rumors are why I decided to use you as an example. As looking deeper into them, we can learn how to pick apart rumors for valuable information, and then cross-reference that information with another source. Unable to contain himself, Naruto burst out, valuable information. What valuable information? Those were just insults. Chuckling at having gotten a rise out of the boy, Kosuke waved his hand, quieting Naruto down so he could continue the lesson. Yes, I understand. At first glance, it just seems like insults, but that's only if we don't dig deeper into them. For example, I believe we can both confirm that your jumpsuit is, in fact, orange. Well yeah, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? That may be so, but did you ever consider that people considering your jumpsuit to be obnoxious is a sign that it is not considered fashionable? That statement also got a rise out of Naruto. Kosuke had directly insulted his sense of fashion by saying that. Hey, what's wrong with my jumpsuit? We'll get back to that later. For now, rumors. On to the next one. You like to pull pranks. having seen some of the outcomes I can confirm that to be true, thus, no need to cross-reference. But let me ask you this, what sort of valuable information does that rumor contain? That got Naruto thinking. He didn't really see any valuable information in that rumor. Maybe that he was fun guy. But that wasn't the most vital of information to a shinobi. Unless maybe to befriend the guy to gather more information. Having nothing else to go off of, Naruto just directly told Kosuke those thoughts. Haha. While that may be true, and a viable possibility, as fun-loving as a ninja may be, they will still usually keep a tight lip on any information they hold. Why don't you try thinking about it from the point of view of planning an attack on yourself? What does pranks have to do with fighting someone? Or attacking someone? He has to be saying this all for a reason, right? He wouldn't mislead me or anything. Kosuke and Naruto stood there, with Naruto thinking about the answer, and Kosuke patiently waiting. Maybe I need to think about it in the reverse. How could I use my pranks to protect myself from an attacker? That's it. Some of my pranks could easily be swapped out for traps or the like. And along with that train of thought, if things got hairy, I've got plenty of experience in running away. I got it. I understand. Surprised by the boy's sudden outburst, Kosuke refocused his attention on him. It's like this, doesn't pulling pranks use similar skills as trapping? In your example, if I heard this rumor, and I was gonna attack myself, I should be worried about what sorts of traps I could employ. Kosuke was impressed. Honestly speaking, it hadn't taken the boy too long to arrive at the conclusion he was hoping to hear. Ready to continue with the lesson, he was surprised even further by what Naruto said next. Following along that train of thought, we can go even further. I'm always getting chased down after my pranks, and occasionally I even manage to escape from members of the Anbu. Thus, if I were to attack myself, I should watch out for attempts to escape, perhaps employing some anti-escape methods. Regardless of how I do it, the point is that it would be something to watch out for. It was above and beyond what Kosuke had expected. Sure, some of the information was not a part of the rumors he had mentioned, but could he really blame the boy for using information he had already known? No, cross-referencing info was part of the lesson, the boy just naturally did it without realizing. Good, good. That was a great answer. Naruto couldn't contain his grin. It wasn't often that he got praised for his answers to questions. In fact, he couldn't remember a single time when he was in the academy that he received praise for his answer to a question. Usually he was lucky if he didn't get yelled at. What about the next rumor? The one about you being the bottom of your class. Regardless of truth, that one still stung for Naruto to hear, and Kosuke had expected that Naruto might have another eruption of anger at hearing it. But Naruto had been full of curveballs for Kosuke that day. Instead of the outburst he was expecting, Naruto just calmly stood there, lost in thought. At that, Kosuke finally wrote the rumor that Naruto was a hothead off in his mind. Sure, the boy had his moments, but overall, he could actually be considered somewhat calm considering his upbringing. While Kosuke thought all of this, Naruto's mind was spinning. Bottom of the class. Bottom of the class. What cold, hard facts are contained there? If I were gonna attack myself, what weaknesses could I exploit? Once again, Naruto thought for a couple minutes, before explaining to Kosuke his answer in a much calmer manner than the first time. Well, the academy grades are composed of 4 main subjects, right? You got the theory classes, taijutsu, shurikenjutsu, and the basic 3. Since each subject is weighted roughly equally, and you need at least a passing grade of 50% in each to graduate, you can assume that the bottom of the class is weak in at least 2 or 3 of the subjects. Kosuke nodded along. It was a start, and not a lot of information to go off of, so the answer was good enough. However, Naruto wasn't finished, as he continued. If we consider that there are actually only 3 types of subjects, with theory being one, jutsu another, and then with taijutsu and shurikenjutsu paired up, it lowers the number of variables. Most people are at least good at one subject, with another subject being average and the third being barely passable. The bottom of the class could reasonably be assumed to be average in one subject and bad at the other 2. The analysis was impressive to Kosuke, and he was sure that now Naruto was done speaking. Opening his mouth to talk, Kosuke was once more cut off by the young boy's enthusiastic talking. If we take into account the other rumor, that I'm childish, one might be able to assume that whoever said that was trying to be nice, and what they really meant was foolish or stupid. One wouldn't really consider being bad at taijutsu or jutsu to make someone stupid, so that must point towards bad grades in the theory classes. Of course, I'm kind of skipping some steps, and have an unfair advantage, because I'm me after all, I know my grades. But so far, I think everything is a reasonable conclusion. Already crossing the rumors about the boy's foolishness out of his brain, Kosuke waited for the boy to tell him he was finished answering, no longer having any doubts about the boy's intellect. Moving on, it's not actually important to know exactly whether or not my taijutsu or jutsu is better, because while the jutsu taught at the academy can have their uses, they aren't really the best techniques in an actual fight. Thus, that means our target, me, is only left with taijutsu and shurikenjutsu, which if we assume I'm best at, that leaves us with a pretty accurate representation of the target's strength and what to expect. Whoever spread the rumor that the boy was childish deserved a death sentence. If that answer and analysis was considered childish in Konoha, every other nation should be paralyzed in fear at the mere mention of the Konoha Information Corps. The boy shows a lot of talent in the field of information analysis. How was this not noticed in the academy? In fact, with his brain, how could he do poorly in theory classes? It should practically be his specialty. Curiosity engaged, Kosuke decided to directly ask the boy himself. He had to know. Maybe he just didn't put in the effort. Naruto, first off, I'm thoroughly impressed. Although, like you said, you have some unfair advantages, that was still an extremely good analysis based on very little information. In fact, it was so good that now I'm curious. Whether you realize it or not, you are very clearly quite intelligent. So how does a smart lad like yourself find himself flunking theory classes in the academy? Upon hearing the word intelligent in relation to himself, Naruto got a sheepish grin, as he unconsciously looked away, embarrassed. He had never even dreamed that someone would think he was smart, much less did he expect to hear it so directly. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto responded, grin still on his face, well, as it turns out, I learned recently from Iruka-sensei that I have something called dyslexia. I still don't fully get what it entails, but Iruka-sensei told me it's why sometimes when I'm reading words can look like they are in code. Not fully knowing what dyslexia was, having never heard of it, Kosuke lamented. From the way Naruto described his condition, it sounded to Kosuke like a genius, loyal to Konoha, had almost been lost. A couple follow-up questions if you don't mind answering them. Is this condition permanent? Also, how many words appear as if in code as you are reading? It's not really a secret. Iruka-sensei himself found most of the information in books. He told me that it was permanent, and that I would have to learn to live with it. And I'd say, probably somewhere between a third and half the words I see look like code. It's kind of hard to say for certain, as I never really counted, ya know. And sometimes it's only certain characters that look off, not the whole word. This information shook Kosuke to his core. This was a condition he had never heard about that could possibly be affecting who knows how many people, and the extra information made him even more impressed with the boy. How had he earned a passing grade without being able to read up to half the material? It was a small wonder the boy was a natural at information analysis. He had to do it every time he tried to read something just to understand it. Going against his own advice to gather information using rumors, Kosuke swore to never use rumors to judge Naruto again in the future. Not only were most of them false or inaccurate, but they also didn't look at the full story of the boy. In any case, Kosuke noted down all the information he had gotten from the boy in the back of his mind, resolved to spend some more time later on to do his own research. It was time for him to get back to his task at hand, teaching the young boy. Just to be certain, you don't need help with reading and writing, right? No worries, Iruka-sensei's got me covered. We're meeting up next week for some practice. Relieved, Kosuke had been preparing to help teach the boy to read himself if he had to, if only to ensure that his intellect was not wasted. Entering into lecture mode, Kosuke took a deep breath, before beginning. In that case, I'd say we can move on from information gathering and rumors for now. We can always do more training for that at a later time. More importantly is lesson 2, picking and choosing missions to take. Now unfortunately, you are a wandering genin, so you don't have a Jonin sensei to do this for you. You also can't take rank C missions by yourself yet due to your inexperience, so that of course leaves rank Ds as your only option. Contrary to popular belief, rank Ds. Some rode in Konoha. Later that day, Naruto could be seen walking the streets of Konoha, cat in his arms. He wasn't in his usual attire, however, instead sporting a look not unlike his new teacher, the Eternal Genin. Replacing the orange jumpsuit was a rather dark set of clothes, black open-toed sandals, black shinobi pants, and standard-issue Konoha chainmail. The only difference in clothes between Naruto and his teacher, outside of the lack of a pan on his back, was that the dark brown tunic had been lost in favor of a black one with a dark orange hemming. Naruto had to resort to begging to get that small amount of orange in his new look. Luckily the Eternal Genin had relented. As he walked, Naruto naturally thought back to his first interaction with the Eternal Genin, or Kosuke, as he had been told to call him. Following the lesson on information and rumors, Kosuke had talked about the various things Naruto needed to keep in mind when taking on work. Since he was a wandering, or career, genin, Naruto was responsible for taking on his own work, which included selecting missions, meeting with clients, and any other prerequisite work that needed to be handled. When on a mission, he would simultaneously be acting as the face of the operation, as well as the entirety of the workforce. As such, Kosuke had brought to Naruto to a clothing store, and practically forced him to buy and switch into his new set of clothes. By the end of the impromptu shopping spree, Naruto had several sets of the new outfit he was expected to wear, and he was forced to promise to obtain a second opinion before he bought new outfits in the future. It had pained Naruto greatly to not be able to wear more of his favorite color, but he had promised Iruka to respect and listen to Kosuke, despite it being complete bullshit in this case. Having gotten several new sets of clothes, Naruto quickly summoned a clone, handing the items over to it to bring back to his apartment for safekeeping. Thinking back on it, while not quite sure if he saw correctly, he could swear that Kosuke was somehow surprised at the sight of him using the shadow clone jutsu. He could have just seen it incorrectly though, so he just continued on thinking about the rest of his time with Kosuke. The rest of their time together was actually quite short as he only briefed Naruto on a couple more items pertaining to taking missions before promptly dumping him, leaving Naruto up to his own devices. As Kosuke had put it, no better way to learn than through practical experience. That was more or less what had transpired between the two. Left to fend for himself, Naruto had essentially gone into the mission center, and selected a D rank at random. It was only after he had confirmed the mission for the third time, that Naruto realized that the lady who was giving him the mission was also giving him a sympathetic look, almost as if she felt sorry for him. Not sure why he would be getting such looks, Naruto left the mission center with the details of his mission, D rank, find and capture Tora the cat. Nodding his head, happy with his choice, a simple mission like capturing a cat would net him around 10,000 ryo. He'd just have to do it a couple more times for this month's rent to be handled. Chuckling to himself, he had rushed off to complete the mission, only to be on his way back to the mission center, cat in hand, in less than 10 minutes. Arriving back to the mission center, Naruto got spooked when the lady who had given him the mission practically launched herself out of her chair, seemingly stunned to see him. Questioningly, Naruto cautiously made his way up to the desk, where the lady was already frantically making a phone call. Not really paying attention to what she was saying, Naruto patiently waited for her to finish her phone call before he spoke. Hello, I'm Genin Uzumaki Naruto in charge of the D-rank mission to capture Tora the cat, reporting in on the completion of the mission, and requesting certification of the completion of the mission. Naruto confidently went through the script Kosuke had taught him for turning in a completed mission, before quietly adding on, also, I'm new, where do I put the cat? Snapping out of her state of shock, the lady stamped Naruto's mission form, marking it as complete before she just uttered, how? Confused, Naruto asked, how? How what? Opening and closing her mouth a couple times, the lady finally managed to say, how did you manage to capture Tora? The Tora? In what? She looked at the clock on the wall, 10 minutes. Not really understanding what the big deal was, Naruto answered truthfully, well, the information included with the mission said the cat was lost somewhere in the park, so I started by heading over there. Naturally, I started looking from there. Getting into the mindset of the cat was a bit tricky, but I knew of a hollowed out tree near a shop that has dried fish for sale. Sure enough, the cat was holed up there, munching on a stolen fish, so I snuck up on it and just grabbed it. Even as he explained what he did and thought over why it was such a big deal, Naruto couldn't find anything that jumped out at him. It was just a cat that he'd captured. Still in utter disbelief, the lady stiffly motioned for Naruto to follow her. As she said, the cat can go here, in this carrier. Putting the cat away, Naruto thanked the lady, despite her weirdness, as he left the mission center, occasionally looking back, only to see the lady giving him a weird look as he left. Standing outside of the mission center, Naruto wasn't really too keen on taking another mission that day. He'd earn more than enough to get by just doing one mission a day. After all, he didn't have to split the money with anyone else. Not to mention the weird lady who was giving out missions that day. Thinking about what to do, he watched ninja come and go from the academy, nothing too interesting. That is, until one group arrived. It looked like a Jonin with his 3 genin, and 2 of the genin were normal enough, just a Hyuga and a girl with her brown hair pulled up into 2 buns. However, the Jonin and the remaining genin were what was strange, both wearing full body, green, spandex suits with what looked like giant, black caterpillars crawling on their faces. Looking closer, the caterpillars were just their eyebrows, but even still, it was a strange look, made even stranger by their close resemblance to one another. If they weren't father and son, they certainly could pass for a pair. Shaking his head, Naruto watched the odd group enter the mission center, before going back to thinking about what to do with the rest of his day. Maybe he should train, or he could try to figure out reading. Indecisive, Naruto stood there long enough for the odd group to come back out of the mission center. Once again, they caught his attention, and he noticed that the 2 normal ones of the group quickly left, leaving the 2 figures dressed in green there talking. It was strange though, Naruto thought he heard screams of the word, youth, and it seemed to be getting brighter. Kai. He hurriedly used the genjutsu breaking technique to no avail, as the sun began to rise behind the pair as they embraced one another. Naruto cursed his past self for not having practiced breaking out of genjutsus more, resolving himself to practice more in the future. The only comfort he received in the moment was that nothing too bad should happen to him in the middle of the day in the village. Well, outside of the torture his eyes were currently going through. Finally, the 2 figures split apart, no longer hugging, and the genjutsu seemed to disappear. Wiping away the sweat that accumulating on his brow, Naruto watched as the taller figure ran off to who knows where, leaving the shorter green figure behind, alone. Despite what he had just witnessed, Naruto was curious. Who were they? What was that genjutsu? So, he approached the green figure to strike up a conversation. It wasn't like he had anything more important going on. Yo, what's up man? The name's Uzumaki Naruto, nice to meet ya. What was that genjutsu you 2 just used? The green figure, having been called on, quickly spun around to face Naruto, instinctively muttering, I can't use jutsu, why does everyone ask about genjutsu when they talk to me? Seemingly brushing it off, the green figure introduced himself as Rock Lee, Konoha's beautiful green wild beast. Uzumaki-san, yes. Would you mind if we moved while we talked? Not really concerned with moving and talking, Naruto replied, yeah, that's fine, only to start caring a lot more when Lee hopped up on his hands to walk. Not being able to contain himself at the peculiar behavior of his new friend, Naruto had to ask, why are you walking on your hands? Ah yes, Uzumaki-san, you must curious. It's great for training your arm strength and balance. I'd very much recommend trying it yourself if you haven't already. Honestly, the answer made sense to Naruto. Lee was training while on the go, it was really efficient, if a bit weird. Do you do that everywhere you go? Certainly not to the bathroom, at least. Seriously, Lee responded, if I can, yes. That is, unless I'm running instead. Naruto was amazed, why'd he need to train that much? Isn't that a lot? Don't you ever get tired, or need to take a break? Nodding, or at least the best he could while upside down, Lee resolutely answered, it is tiring, and I won't take breaks. Maybe a genius like Neji can afford to take breaks, but not me. The only way for me to catch up and surpass him is to be working while he's resting. That shocked Naruto. What sort of genius was Neji? To push someone to walk on their hands everywhere, only to close the gap a tiny bit. And even crazier than the talent of this Neji guy, was the dedication this guy had to surpassing him. I get working hard, but couldn't you try something else to beat this Neji guy? Like I don't know, learn a new jutsu or two, and catch him by surprise. Half resigned, Lee replied, I am unable to mold nor use chakra. I was born with a malformed chakra network, thus, the only way for me to defeat Neji and be a ninja, is through taijutsu and the power of my body. Naruto was shaken, he had begun to think that he had it bad, with being stupid and not able to read from the dyslexia. But here was someone who probably had it worse, unable to use chakra as ninja. It was inspiring really. Despite his condition, he was still able to follow his dream of being a ninja and work so hard without falling into despair. Lee was an interesting guy, that much was certain. And his story got Naruto thinking, wait a minute, he can't use chakra, and is trying to defeat a genius of a ninja with nothing but taijutsu and effort. He's gotta be some sort of taijutsu master then, right? After all, it's the only thing he trains. I may be decent at taijutsu, but there is definitely something I can learn from this guy, because it's not like I have a sensei to learn from. Putting words and action to his thoughts, Naruto asked, hey Lee, you only really train taijutsu, right? Flipping up onto his feet, he nodded his head, now right side up, saying, yeah. I mean, I do practice shurikenjutsu as well, but it's mostly taijutsu. Naruto was forced to start jogging, as Lee had started soon after getting off of his hands. Well then, do you think you could give me some advice on training up my taijutsu? Hesitating, it was Lee's turn to ask a question. I'd be more than happy to Uzumaki-san, but wouldn't your Jonin-sensei mind? Don't you have missions to go on, not to mention the training your sensei gives? Naruto casually replied, yeah, that's not gonna be an issue. You see, I'm a career genin, I don't got no Jonin sensei looking after me. That's part of the reason why I'm asking you for help, don't really got anyone else to teach me, ya know. Lee turned to Naruto in shock, still jogging, you don't have a sensei. Don't they send you back to the academy if you fail your sensei's graduation test? Naruto casually replied, well, you see, I didn't technically graduate. I failed the test, but then some stuff happened, and I ended up getting a field promotion to genin. Turns out, that sort of screwed up the system they had going, leaving me alone and without a jonin to guide me. Nodding in understanding, Lee shrugged, must have been something big for you to get a field promotion while we're at peace. In any case, I can help you with your training whenever I'm not on missions or training with my team, in which case you can find me at Training Ground 8. That's where I train by myself, and if you see me there, you are more than welcome to join me. Thankful, Naruto opened his mouth to thank Lee, before being cut off before he was able to. Of course, you probably would want to be able to train on your own, regardless of my presence, right? Stammering out an, yeah. Naruto waited for Lee to continue speaking. In that case, I can recommend a few general exercises that you should be able to conduct by yourself. To start with, there's push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. Pretty simple and can be done anywhere. If you go to the woods, you can also do exercise there like pull-ups or hanging sit-ups. All of that will build up your strength. For cardio, you should either jog, like we are now, or you can also walk on your hands, like I did earlier. Swimming can also work as well. It was a lot of information all of a sudden, and Naruto tried to remember every word. Some of it he had heard before, but others, like using trees for certain exercises or swimming was new. After pausing for a moment to let Naruto process the information, Lee carried on talking. If you buy yourself some weights, you can also do exercises with those. Although I'd recommend using body weights, and once advanced enough, chakra weights. Naruto had never heard of body weights, nor the apparently more advanced chakra weights. Not to mention Lee couldn't use chakra, right? What was the deal there? Lee, I got a question. Pausing his spiel, Lee turned to Naruto. Yeah. First off, what are body weights and chakra weights? Secondly, I thought you couldn't use chakra, so what's the deal there with you and chakra weights? Good questions. Think of body weights as a special type of weight that you can strap to your body to carry out exercises with. They effectively will make your body, arms, and legs feel heavier while using them and training, then you take them off and your body will move much faster. That made sense to Naruto, but he was still curious about the chakra weights. Chakra weight, on the other hand, are an application of fuinjutsu that causes the same effect as body weights, except they are more compact, and usually a lot heavier, too. That's also how I am able to use them, as they are a type of fuinjutsu that can run constantly once turned on. Oh, so someone else who can use chakra turns them on for you, then you wear them around. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm actually wearing a set right now on my legs. Lee pointed to his orange leg warmers. They are beneath my leg warmers. Whoa, you're telling me this guy's been doing all this with added weight? And I didn't see him do anything when he came back from whatever mission he was doing. Was he wearing the weights the entire time as well? Sheesh. Let me guess, you wear those all the time as well. Yup. Of course, his guess was right. While the beautiful from his title might be up for debate, he definitely fit the bill of a green wild beast. Well, Uzumaki-san, my team and I just returned from a C rank mission, so my sensei gave us the rest of the day off. I don't know what you have planned, but I'm going to go train. Care to join me? Naively, Naruto replied with a yes, sealing his fate, although he was not aware of it yet. Some guy's backyard. Morning. Naruto was weeding some schmuck's garden, still not understanding how weeding or painting fences could be considered work for ninja. Even with him being a genin, the D ranks he had seen seemed almost juvenile. Logically, couldn't civilians do the work instead? Perhaps they might not be able to handle catching cats, like he did yesterday, as they could be too sneaky and fast, but that didn't stop them from handling all the weeding and fence painting for the village. Heck, Naruto knew for a fact that some of the village's orphans would be more than willing to take on the work. And wouldn't it save time for ninjas like him to do more important work, or at least train? Although, thinking on it some more, Naruto couldn't quite figure out what sort of work would replace the missing D ranks for genin. Maybe escorting less important merchant caravans. The more advanced genin could probably even help with training the academy students. Sure, he, himself, didn't really comply with the needs for that role, but surely someone like Lee could teach them taijutsu. Speaking of Lee, the training session the day before was brutal, and Naruto's muscles still ached. The guy was no less than a machine. Naruto struggled to keep up with exercises he was doing, and that wasn't even factoring in that Lee had chakra weights on the entire time. It was just one exercise after the next, over and over again for hours on end. Naruto had never appreciated his unnaturally high stamina so much as he did during the workout. Even as tough as it was, he did not regret the experience, however, as he could imagine how strong Lee must be if he trained that much. Heck, if he trained that much, and still couldn't beat that Neji guy, Naruto felt chills imagining having to fight him. It also made Naruto feel weak, in a way, as both Lee and Neji, as strong as they were still genin, like him. If the gap between himself and them were so high, despite the same rank, he couldn't imagine the difference between himself and the Hokage. Thinking back on it though, he had bested Mizuki, who had been a chunin, in a fight just a couple days prior. So, was Mizuki just really weak for a chunin? Or were Lee and Neji just unreasonably strong genin? Honestly, it was probably both. After all, weren't chunin more valued for leadership skills and experience rather than strength and raw talent? Regardless, thinking about his peers' strength and D-rank work wouldn't aid the Naruto of the moment in the least. No matter what, he was still stuck in the garden, weeding. And as a bonus, after he was done weeding, he also had to repaint the fence. Both sides, too. It was gonna be a long, tough day of work, but he had to do it if he wanted to be able to save up to afford some chakra weights like Lee. Having finished his mission and received his pay, freedom was restored to Naruto. Fortunately, that weird lady was not working the mission desk that day, so he didn't need to deal with her ogling. The issue was, he didn't know what to do with his extra free time. The mission he had done had taken up so much of his day that he didn't really think it would be possible for him to do another. Not to mention, that his teacher, Kosuke, was off on a C-rank mission and he wasn't expected to return to the village for at least a couple days, so that option was bust. Iruka was probably busy with prep work for the classes he taught, and it was still a couple days until they would meet to check Naruto's ability to read anyways. Another option bust. Thus, Naruto decided to gamble, heading off to a particularly quiet and hidden rooftop. If he was right, he could probably find Choji and Shikamaru there, hanging out, provided they weren't doing a mission themselves, or training. It's not like he'd miss out on anything by heading to check. Covering the distance in a relatively short amount of time, Naruto silently celebrated, his memory and luck hadn't failed him. On the roof, just before him, was Shikamaru gazing at the passing clouds, with Choji sitting next to him, eating an apple. The apple somewhat surprised Naruto, until he got a bit closer and saw the pile of empty chip bags on the ground near the pair. Choji had run out of supplies. Just how long had the two been there? Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto approached the pair, keen on talking the pair. As if able to sense him, Shikamaru nudged Choji, who spun around as Naruto approached. Choji, upon seeing it was Naruto, whispered to Shikamaru, "We're good, it's just Naruto." Relaxing himself at the information, Shikamaru let out a sigh of relief before saying, "Hey, what's up, Naruto? You scared the shit out of me, thought you were my mom coming to get me or something." Confused about why Shikamaru would be so scared of his mom, Naruto shrugged it off as a Nara thing. The men of the clan were known for their laziness, so it might have had something to do with that. In any case, Naruto made sure to exchange pleasantries with the pair, before finding himself a spot to sit down near them. They sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the quiet, before an unpredictable event happened. The Shikamaru, broke the silence. "Say, Naruto, yeah, I gotta ask, what's the deal with the scar?" Choji stopped himself mid-bite. "Wait a minute. What's this about Naruto and scars?" Cautiously Choji continued his bite into his apple, as he turned and inspected Naruto. Black shoes, check. Black pants, check. Black and orange tunic, check. Chainmail, check. Headband, check. Naruto was fully clothed, covering up most of his body, not exposing any possible scarring. Although, looking closer, beneath Naruto's headband, barely peeking out, was what looked to be a scar. Realizing that Naruto did have a pretty gnarly scar, Choji burst out, "Holy shit. I never noticed that you had a scar on your forehead, Naruto. Although I suppose it would have been covered by your goggles, right?" Although somewhat uncomfortable to talk about, Naruto wanted to answer his friend's inquiries. Of course, he couldn't exactly tell them everything, but just the fact he'd been hit in the head with a rock shouldn't be a big deal. "Oh, this," he said, removing his headband to reveal the much larger scar. "During the chase the other day after the prank I totally did not commit, someone hit me with a rock, and this is the result." Nodding their heads, Shikamaru and Choji didn't think much deeper into it. Putting aside whether or not Naruto was responsible for that day's prank, they'd often seen how mad people got at Naruto's pranks. And honestly, it could be expected that people that mad might throw a rock or two at you. The two were a bit surprised at just how big the scar was, considering it was just supposed to be a rock thrown out of anger considering a prank. It's not like they had any other grievances with Naruto. More importantly to Shikamaru, however, was that he had only just looked at Naruto for the first time when he pulled his headband off to reveal the full scar. Something was off about him, and it was obvious. It wasn't just the elephant in the room, it was the whole goddamn circus. Honestly, the curiosity Shikamaru had for Naruto's scar was nothing in comparison to the curiosity he was now feeling. Even if the world was going to end, he had to know. Naruto, what are you wearing? Absolutely puzzled, Naruto looked down at himself. He was still just wearing the clothes Kosuke had picked out for him. Don't tell me. Maybe Kosuke was the one with the bad sense of fashion the entire time. Shit. I can't believe he tricked me into buying these clothes. Starting to fume, Naruto thinking about how he could teach Kosuke a lesson for this transgression when Choji followed up on Shikamaru's question. Yeah, Naruto, when do you get into fashion? I didn't think you had it in you with that orange jumpsuit you always wore around. Never mind, I guess I'm still the one with the bad sense of fashion. Answering his friend's doubts, Naruto sadly replied, "Oh, these. Kosuke made me get them. They're supposed to invoke a better image for Konoha, and, no, you cannot wear that orange abomination. Honestly, I thought it was bullshit, but the clients so far have been treating me pretty good, so I guess there's something to it." Nodding his head, Choji readily accepted the answer at face value. Shikamaru, however, only had more questions in his mind. Okay, makes sense. Those are more presentable, but what do you mean the clients have been treating you well? Doesn't your Jonin instructor deal with them? Oh, and who's Kosuke? Is he a teammate of yours, or maybe your Jonin instructor? Realizing that he hadn't spoken to his classmates since before that night with Mizuki, Naruto began to see why they had so many questions for him. Long story. I'll give you the quick rundown first, I suppose. Don't got a Jonin instructor, so I gotta deal with the clients myself. And Kosuke's the guy who's teaching me the ropes of being a career genin. You might also know him by the name, the Eternal Genin. That somewhat resolved Shikamaru's question from the other day regarding Naruto, and it also made sense that he'd be dealing with clients with him having no Jonin to do it for him. Once again, however, that raised another question that Shikamaru had been wondering about: just how did Naruto graduate after having failed the test? Well, I suppose that makes sense why you were the odd one out when we were getting our assignments. But that still doesn't really explain why you don't have a Jonin instructor. Wouldn't you still need one? Not to mention, I'm still curious, didn't you fail your exam? How'd you still graduate? And is that related to your lack of Jonin supervision? That was a lot of questions at once, but they felt similar to ones Naruto had heard before. Didn't Lee ask a similar line of questions the day before? All your questions are related in a way. You're right that I didn't pass the test, however, I still graduated, just in a different way. The details are sealed, so I can't tell you the specifics, but I ended up receiving a field promotion. And due to that field promotion, apparently, I completely messed up the whole 3 genins with a Jonin instructor system they had going. So, their solution to the problem I created ended up being making me a career genin. Since that wasn't exactly fair, the Eternal Genin was put in charge of teaching me. Shikamaru could wrap his head around that answer, but it really got him thinking. Naruto was called a screw-up by many people. Maybe they had jinxed themselves into being at the forefront of one of his screw-ups. But seriously, it was weird to think that a sole genin could screw up the entire graduation system the village had going. It was honestly impressive. At the same time, Shikamaru found himself maybe slightly respecting Naruto. The dude had failed the graduation test and still found a way to get promoted. That intense round of questioning, however, did leave things a bit awkward. It wasn't like they could just go back to sitting in silence after that. Luckily for Shikamaru, he would not have to think about the awkwardness for long. As soon after Naruto answered the last question, Choji's stomach growled. In response, the big boned boy said, "Hee hee, I guess it's time to eat. I already know your answer, Shika, but Naruto, wanna come with?" Spending time with friends, Naruto could not turn down that opportunity. Quickly agreeing to the proposal, and tagging along, already wondering what they'd be eating. Choji skillfully led the way, with Naruto behind him, and Shikamaru trailing some further distance behind, moving at a sluggish pace. The trio walked on in silence, eventually arriving in front of Barbecue Akamichi, which Choji and Shikamaru promptly entered. Naruto lagged behind, trying to process that he had just been led to his friend's family-owned business. The guy had literally just unashamedly found more business for his own people. Shaking his head, Naruto entered the building, quickly finding the table where his friends were already seated. Interestingly, the table was already filled with meats and vegetables, although they had only just entered the restaurant a couple seconds prior. Furthermore, it looked like they were eating hot pot. Naruto wasn't quite sure, he hadn't eaten hot pot before, but he was pretty sure that's what it was. Skillfully, Choji and Shikamaru began cooking their preferred foods, with Shikamaru gingerly putting in some meat, whereas Choji looked like a tornado, grabbing multiple different items, and putting them in. It didn't really look like he was being picky, just picking up whatever meat or vegetable he could the fastest. It was a new experience for Naruto, and sitting down, he began to copy what Shikamaru was doing with his food, not daring to attempt Choji's strategy. As if sensing Naruto's hesitance, Choji asked, still continuing his tornado of food prep, "Yo, you okay Naruto? You look kind of awkward, have you never eaten hot pot before?" Somewhat dejectedly, Naruto shook his head, saying, "No, never had the opportunity. I usually just stick to ramen." That shocked Choji, sure he was an orphan, but to have never eaten hot pot, that just seemed weird. Shikamaru, on the other hand, just brushed it off, it wasn't that strange to him, he only really ate hot pot with Choji, after all. It ate at Choji though, as he thought back to all the times he'd seen Naruto eating. Naruto had said he'd only ever really eaten toast in the morning. At the academy, Choji had never seen Naruto eat even a snack. And the only time Choji had seen him at dinnertime was at Ichiraku's when he occasionally went. Heck, thinking back on it, hadn't Naruto been there every time he went to Ichiraku's? Choji almost brushed it off, but food was his bread and butter, pun not intended, and things weren't adding up. Stopping the tornado, he asked, "Naruto, what do you usually eat, besides ramen?" Honestly, Choji had never thought about food in relation to Naruto before, but he was a bit worried about what he might hear as an answer. Naruto was an orphan, but surely. Outside of ramen, I don't know, toast in the morning with a glass of milk. I think that's about it. It was so much worse than what Choji thought. That was bad, like, really, really bad. Sure, he always had a bag of chips with him, but that was purely for caloric needs relating to his jutsu. He much preferred more well-balanced meals, with a mix of meat and vegetables. To be honest, it was a miracle that Naruto had managed to survive thus far with a diet of essentially only ramen. Realistically, it shouldn't even be possible. Please Naruto, please tell me you're joking, Choji pleaded with Naruto for the truth. Shikamaru turned to his friend, surprised by the desperation in his voice. What was the big deal? Choji please went unanswered. No, why would I joke about that? It took several deep breaths for Choji to calm himself, which deeply concerned both Naruto and Shikamaru. What was the big deal? Choji, are you doing okay? Rubbing his head, Choji waved his friend off, saying, I'm perfectly fine. What's not fine, however, is Naruto. At a loss, both Naruto and Shikamaru unconsciously let out, me. Naruto. Struggling to remain calm, Choji continued, yes, you, Naruto. You and Shikamaru don't realize it yourselves, but what you just said to me, a food expert, is one of the worst things I've heard in my life. Naruto, doubtful, despite the conviction in Choji's words, asked, what do you mean? Surely, you're exaggerating. Plenty of people like to eat ramen, I just happen to love ramen. I don't see what's the big deal about that. Choji could see that Naruto didn't understand, so he patiently explained, Naruto, the problem isn't your love of ramen. I like it myself. The problem is that you only eat ramen. Shikamaru caught onto Choji's words, but Naruto was still looking puzzled, thus, Choji continued. You see, people have needs. Nutritional needs, ones that cannot solely be filled by ramen alone. To be fully honest with you, I don't know how you're alive right now, it's that serious. Although Shikamaru knew about proper nutrition, it wasn't something he ever really thought about. And it was only when Choji had pointed it out that he began to realize how strange what Naruto had just said was. How was he alive? Sheepishly, Naruto tried to laugh it off. Well, if I'm still alive, then I suppose it's not that big of a deal, now, is it? He chuckled, finding it amusing, that is, until he noticed the lack of laughter coming from his two friends who were having a silent conversation with their eyes. Sighing, Shikamaru said, "You know more about it than me, Choji, you should explain it to him." Choji had wanted his smarter friend to explain it, but what Shikamaru said did convince him to do it instead. He did no more, after all. Naruto, putting aside your miraculous survival. One of the reasons why proper nutrition is so important, and thus, your ramen-only diet being so bad, is that your body requires various things to properly grow and develop. Ignoring any humor in you being so short, your diet is probably why. Not to mention, it's not really possible to put on muscle or get stronger without a well-balanced diet. Choji paused to let the information sink into Naruto's brain, before continuing. Look, I wouldn't say anything if it wasn't a big deal, but it really is. And as your friend, I'd hate to see something preventable cause your death, whether that be from lack of nutrition, or from the hands of shinobi you'd have beat with a better diet. Choji had hit him where it hurts, his height and his ability as a shinobi. Now with more understanding, Naruto sat in silence, thinking about all that he'd just heard. Naruto, I'll cut you a deal, Choji said, unsealing a book from a scroll he had on him. Here's an Akamichi-based cookbook. I'll give it to ya for free, just promise me to use it, and stop eating only ramen. Silently accepting the book, Naruto looked through it, only to be confronted with the damned code. Of course, he'd forgotten about his dyslexia. What use would a book be that he couldn't read anyway? Everything he'd heard at the restaurant was bringing him down, and the code in the book, that might have been the last straw. That is, if Choji wasn't there to save the day with some good news. Now that I'm thinking about it, what's wrong with you? That was a bad way to put it though, as Choji realized and quickly corrected his words as he watched his friend's face drop. I don't mean it like that. What I mean, is 1, you shouldn't be alive with your diet. That's impressive on its own. But also, you're well known for your insane stamina, like, you always would get your ass kicked by Sasuke, and you could just brush it off and get up. That fired Naruto up. Hey. Those fights were close. I never got my ass kicked. He's lucky Iruka-sensei would save him every time. Unconvinced, Choji continued, well, regardless of who kicked whose ass, and who was saved by who. It still stands, you're lucky to be alive, much less able to run around non-stop like nobody's business. Not to mention, you're one of the stronger guys from our class. That shouldn't be possible with your diet, and here you are. That got both Shikamaru and Naruto thinking. That sure was strange. Shikamaru, in particular, noted it down in his mind as another weird thing about Naruto, before he turned back to paying attention to what Choji was saying. Continuing with that train of thought, wouldn't you be practically unstoppable with a better diet? Heck, the wound where your scar is healed quickly, right? Yeah, pretty much overnight. That's really weird as well. If me or Shika got hurt like that, it'd be at least a week before it really started healing up. Overnight, it'd only scab up at most. With proper nutrition, your wound might have completely healed overnight instead. Shit, the more things I list off, and the more things I hear about you, the stranger it gets. Naruto nodded his head, wondering whether it might be the Kyuubi's work. Mizuki had said something about him being the Kyuubi, which did not really make sense, because wouldn't the village have killed him then? Still, it had to be related to that. After all, if that wasn't considered, then he was just a normal orphan. Shikamaru, on the other hand, knew nothing about the Kyuubi being sealed in Naruto, and everything Choji had said while at the restaurant was very weird. Making notes in his mind about everything he had heard, he resolved himself to look into it at a later time. Screw it, all this thinking is working up my appetite, I gotta eat. But look here Naruto, I still wanna hear you promise to eat better from now on before you leave here today. And in that regard, I'd also say you should study up on the nutritional sciences, it's surprisingly useful for ninja like us. Excited at the possibilities that would open up from a better diet, Naruto quickly saluted, "Hi, Choji-sensei. I will do as you say." The trio broke out into a laugh at the comedic salutation, before going back to eating. "Oh yeah, Choji, where'd you pull the cooking book from anyhow?" "Oh, I got a storage scroll full of food that had it in it." "What's a storage scroll?" Taking over, Shikamaru began to explain. A storage scroll is an application of Fuinjutsu. Author's note. Haha, kind of late for me to put out a chapter, but I actually went to class for once. Think I was sick earlier in the week, so at least I had some form of excuse, but really couldn't put off class any further. This chapter is my longest yet, once again dialogue heavy, and by my count, 8.5 pages in Word. Took me a couple hours to write, but I'm happy with how it came out. To be honest, I can't live with that ramen-only diet Naruto bullshit, had to get rid of that early on. And who better to do that than the master of food himself, Choji? Not gonna lie, Rock Lee and Choji are two of my favorite characters in the series, and I'm hoping to use them more in the future. We also got Shikamaru in on the weird happenings surrounding Naruto, who knows where that might go. In any case, it's late, don't know whether I'll start the next chapter tonight or wait till tomorrow. Regardless, I got the next couple of chapters roughly planned out, so shouldn't take too long. Hope you enjoyed reading. Smiley face. Naruto's apartment equals. Too early in the morning. Writhing around in his bed, Naruto shouted obscenities. He had been asleep, dreaming of fields of ramen where he frolicked freely with frogs and foxes. They played pranks on each other, all in good faith, and ate from the infinite supply of ramen when they were hungry. It was a blissful dream that Naruto did not want to wake from, one where he played leapfrogs with frogs, and did not have to worry about his training. But alas, it was not meant to be, as here he was, headache dying out at last. Honestly, it wasn't even that bad of a headache. He'd only reacted to the usual influx of memories so strongly due being forcibly woken up from the amazing dream. Ow, I'll never be able to have that dream again. It was so good, so much fun. I wish I could find the clone responsible for this and strangle him to death myself. It was no use crying over spilled milk, the clone had already popped, it was too late to do it himself. Exasperated, he looked over at the clock on his nightstand, it read 6:13 a.m. Ow, of course. Don't even have enough time to go back to sleep. Still a bit angry, Naruto forced himself out of bed. If was up that early he might as well get ready for his day a bit ahead of time. While going about his business, getting ready for the day, Naruto began to think how strange it was for a clone to have transferred over memories. He hadn't made a clone for the past couple of days. Shrugging, he began to look through the clone's memories to find when he had made it. As it turns out, the clone was the same clone that had led the pranking operation on the Anbu headquarters, and thinking back on it, Naruto hadn't received any memories from that specific clone. Feeling that something was off, Naruto stopped getting ready and sat down to take a good look at the clone's memories. The clone, disguised as a brown-haired boy, entered Ichiraku's incognito and ordered a bowl of ramen. It was no longer as panicked about a wave of clones sweeping through and eating up all the stock of ramen before it could get any. After all, the clone didn't remember seeing any other clone take some money with them from the apartment to pay for said ramen. Sadly, the clone, in its haste, had only grabbed enough money for exactly one bowl of ramen. At least the original couldn't get too mad at it for using his money. Chuckling to himself, the clone waited for the ramen patiently. The moment it arrived, however, the clone was not so patient, practically inhaling the stuff. It might have been the fastest Naruto, or one of his clones, had ever eaten a bowl of ramen, and the clone could swear that Ichiraku looked impressed. Geez, I knew my food was good, didn't know it was quite that good. You must have been quite hungry to eat that fast. Heck, I don't even think Naruto could eat a full bowl that fast. The clone was in disguise, so it decided not to act too friendly, quickly saying, "Haha, yeah, hadn't eaten a thing all day. Thanks for the food, I'll be sure to come around again sometime." With that, the clone left, not wanting to linger too long. The main Naruto was going to be getting chased any minute now. It figured it should disperse itself before that happened. Not wanting to freak out the nearby civilians, or trigger the Anbu, the clone navigated itself to a rather hidden spot, a dead end down one of the many alleyways of Konoha, and pulled out a kunai to disperse itself with. Or at least it was going to disperse itself. But right as it was about to stab itself, its supply of chakra suddenly shot up by a small amount. What? Why'd I suddenly got more chakra? The situation was confusing. It was a clone, and clones did not regenerate chakra by themselves. Or at least, the normal clone jutsu did not allow for that. As normal, non-solid clones would continually operate until they burned through their supply of chakra or were dispersed by the creator. Then again, it was a solid clone made with one of Konoha's forbidden jutsu, maybe the clones made with the technique regenerated chakra on their own. If it was the case, it'd be pretty cool. A clone could be summoned, wait to max out on chakra, before summoning another clone and repeating the cycle until they had an army. It wasn't realistic, however, as even now, it could feel its supply of chakra slowly being consumed. Still, while the clone was a clone of Naruto, it wasn't that stupid. It knew it did not feel it wrongly when its supply of chakra increased, as small as that increase might have been. Just as it was really starting to think about digging into the details of what had occurred, memories began to flow into the clone's head. The other clones had all dispersed themselves so that they couldn't be caught with Naruto, thus giving up that he knew the shadow clone jutsu. That'd ruin a perfect alibi, that the main Naruto had been with Iruka the whole day and couldn't possibly pull off such a large-scale prank in the 10 minutes he had to himself. And the village should buy it. After all, Iruka wouldn't lie to them all, now would he? Regardless, the clone No had two decisions to weigh. It could either disperse itself, thus completely negating the risk that the main's ability to use the shadow clone jutsu is exposed, but possibly missing out on whatever made the clone special and allowed it to regenerate chakra. Or it could not disperse itself and remain incognito while retracing its steps. The clone was a clone of Naruto, and he figured the main would understand if he took the risk. Dilemma solved. The clone double-checked its henge before moving out to retrace its steps, only stopping itself the moment before it left the alleyway. Couldn't it just compare its memories to that of its fellow clones to search for discrepancies? It'd also be way easier to stay incognito if it remained in the little hideout it was currently in. Reviewing its memories, nothing really jumped out at the clone. It had been created, already knowing its mission. It had taken some money from the main stash in the apartment, before leaving to the tree where it observed the Anbu headquarters from. It then sat there for a few hours, before leading the operation on the headquarters. Following that, it went and ate some ramen, then arrived at its current position. The clone was forced to review the memories of its fellows to find an answer. Radioing, cleaning, pranking, dispersing. That was all the clones' memories, nothing but their assigned duties. Nothing set itself aside from the others save for two main things, him taking the money and him eating the ramen. It didn't really think the money was the issue, as it had sat for hours with it on him and hadn't felt any increase in his chakra. That only left the ramen. The ramen must have done something. It made sense, the food was the work of the gods, after all, having mystical chakra restoring powers wasn't too far-fetched. The clone would need more money to confirm its suspicions. With the main Naruto currently being chased, it could only rely on itself to obtain the funding it needed. And there was only one way it knew how. Stealing more money from the original. The clone casually made its way through the streets of Konoha, admiring the wild chase that was ensuing. It did feel uncomfortable, however, as it saw some men with actual weapons moving to participate. Not to mention all the people cursing the original, it didn't seem like the friendly sort of chase they had been expecting. The clone forced itself to ignore its worries, it had something bigger to worry about. Not to mention that the original could handle himself well enough if it came to it. With that said, the clone hurriedly made its way back to the apartment and secured the funding it needed for its new mission. From there, the clone's memories repeated. It would hide out in the alleyway and periodically leave to go to Ichiraku's for some ramen. Eventually Ichiraku had gotten curious about his new regular, with the clone introducing himself as Chunmaru. Naruto had always figured, if all the other villagers hate him, surely Ichiraku did as well, he was just better at hiding it. Thus, it was nice to see that old man Ichiraku treated him as well as any other customer, as it cured a deep-seated worry of the boy. However, as nice as that was to see, Naruto was still pissed. The clone had, in a period of 4 days, blown through almost 20,000 ryo on ramen alone. Regardless of whether it was for an experiment or not, that was a lot of money for Naruto. Money that he'd have to make up with more D ranks. At least it garnered interesting results, as the clone confirmed that eating ramen could restore a tiny portion of chakra to the clones. But it also got Naruto to thinking about his conversation the day before with Choji. Ramen wasn't the most nutritious and buying it from Ichiraku's all the time wasn't really feasible, especially so if they tried to make an army of clones using it. Not to mention that there was no way old man Ichiraku could feed an entire army by himself. Back to the main point, though. Naruto wondered whether different types of food would supply more chakra to the clones than ramen did. If that was the case, then it would be far easier to maintain them. Nodding his head, Naruto decided that he would summon some clones after he was done getting ready to begin experimenting with different foods. Several clones were standing around the table in Naruto's apartment, occasionally grabbing food from the table, and eating it. Each clone had a paper in front of them, where they wrote down what food they had eaten, and how much chakra they thought it restored. The clones had started the experiment excited at the prospect of not just fizzling out within a couple days, but by the end, all the hope in their eyes had vanished. They had gone through all the food purchased in just a couple minutes, as their sheer numbers made it, so each clone only had to consume 1 or 2 items. It seemed like foods heavy in meat and vegetables would give more chakra, hence it might have something to do with nutrition, but in the end, no food would provide enough chakra for a clone to survive indefinitely. The results were not satisfactory, for the clones or Naruto. The disappointment in the room was palpable, and Naruto, as the original, was the most disappointed of all. It felt manufactured in a way, like someone had left the possibility there for someone to find but left just outside of reach on purpose. And honestly, Naruto began to wonder whether the clones' thoughts and emotions were affecting him. Sure, he cared for the clones, but at the end of the day, they were still just another technique in his arsenal. Was it really that big of a deal that they weren't permanent? He had enough chakra, he could just summon more at any moment. A clone, as if voicing Naruto's thoughts, spoke sadly, "Well, we're just dumb old clones anyhow, it's not a big deal if we survive for 10 seconds or can live a lifetime, right?" As sad as it was the reality for the clones, one they remorsefully accepted. But something about that rubbed Naruto the wrong way. Who says it's not a big deal? Who says these clones don't deserve a fighting chance? Clones. Tell me, is that really how you feel? A clone went to respond before Naruto cut him off. That was rhetorical. You guys are me, and I am you guys. We're all the same, I know what our answer really is. Who cares whether y'all are clones or not? I don't care, and y'all definitely shouldn't sell yourselves short. The clones started to get riled up. The original was right, they didn't want to live short 10 seconds lives, they wanted to live. We're ninja for crying out loud. Sure, we're bottom of the barrel, barely graduated ninja, but ninja nonetheless. We can shoot fireballs from our mouths, teleport, and create living, breathing copies of ourselves. Who's to say there isn't some other way, outside of food, for clones to restore their energy with? The answer could be out there. And heck, it could even be really easy to do. We just gotta find it. The original was right, there's gotta be some method to survive, they'd only really tried one thing, who's to say there isn't something else out there? The clones once again regained their hope, and their excitement, but they forced themselves to hold it in. Now I'll ask y'all one thing, Naruto yelled, holding up a single finger, who's with me? Who wants to find the answer? Our answer. That was the last straw, the Narutos had been cooped up for far too long. Forced into different clothes, to act a certain way to handle clients, to be calm despite their excitement at finally being a ninja. The apartment filled with shouts and cheers that surely would have woken up anybody sleeping in the nearby apartments if there were anybody there. The horde of Narutos were activated, they were excited, and they were ready to get out there and find their answer. Beginning their march under the watchful eye of the original, it was the first clone who reached the door who broke the group out of their fervor. So, what's the plan even? How are we gonna go about finding our answer? It was cold water poured over their many heads, they had whipped each other up into a frenzy without taking a step back for a moment to create an actual plan outside of, just do it. The rabid Narutos were once again calm, as they began to sit down in pairs and trios, discussing plans of action. As it turned out, the same clone who stopped the group at the door, was also the one who came up with the answer. I know we hate doing it, and we got the dyslexia and all, but isn't the best option really just reading some books? The clone felt the fear of God well up inside himself upon saying so, as every Naruto in the room, including the original, turned, and stared daggers at him with their eyes. Sweating, it continued to speak, trying to remain unfazed. Well, like we don't really have anybody to ask, right? We don't know anybody who knows the technique. Not to mention that we don't really know a lot of people. The only person we might be able to ask would Iruka, and I doubt he'd know. That really just leaves us with books, doesn't it? As much as they hated it, it was the best solution anyone had come up with. Still, they didn't want to resort to having to read to get by, so before they committed to it, they held an impromptu meeting to discuss it. The clones rapidly set up the room for the meeting, with the table set up in the middle of the room. The clones then split up into two groups, or factions, with one side being the pro-reading front, and the other being the anti-book coalition. Each group had one representative sit at the table. Heading the pro-reading front was the clone that had proposed reading to begin with, while the anti-book coalition was represented by a particularly hard-headed Naruto clone. The original Naruto was seated at the head of the table, acting as a judge. Although the situation appeared comical, the meeting itself was anything but. I declare the first meeting regarding the continued life of clones, open. Starting with the pro-reading front, to which several hastily made banners were waved, and then continuing on to the anti-book coalition, again, with more banners, state your cases. Thank you, Honorable Judge. We at the pro-reading front, PRF, present a simple case. Us clones need information, and have no one to go to for it, thus leading to the natural conclusion that we require books to provide us with answers. Yes, the original did not seem convinced, the argument was weak, and superfluous. Turning to the anti-book coalition, he said, and the anti-book coalition's case, if you please. Yes, Honorable Judge. As a Naruto clone, I think I can speak for all of us when I say, books bad. It is the anti-book coalition's ABC's case that we should not be forced to do what we do not like to do. The original Naruto was not a fair and unbiased judge, clearly favoring the option where he would not have to read. After all, who wants to mess around with all those words in code? The room and I have heard both sides' opening remarks. Now, I will open the room for discussion between both sides, and please, keep it civil. It was a foolish thing, asking Narutos to be civil, but it worked. They couldn't exactly accomplish anything if they weren't civil, after all. I suppose we at the PRF will start, if those of the ABC do not mind. The floor is yours. Clearing his throat, the PRF clone got up from his seat, the clones on his side quickly making space for him to move around. Pacing around, the clone started. To begin, I will start with a question for the ABC. How do you propose we go about figuring out the clone chakra issue, if not through books? Boos erupted from the ABC side of the room, as they began to shout, that's not fair. And, that's a low blow. The original Naruto stood up, smacking the table, and quieting the room. As he did so, the original shouted, as much as I hate to admit it, that is a fair question. ABC representative, please answer it. He then sat back in his chair, regaining his calm. While we at the ABC do not have an exact solution to the question, we believe that one will emerge in the future, given enough time. Thus, reading is not necessarily needed to solve our problems. And I would like to ask a question in return. How do you know we can find a solution by reading? It was as if an explosion rocked through the room. The PRF representative struggled to stay standing, requiring the support of his followers standing behind him. Adjusting the pair of glasses he had hinged onto his face, the PRF representative shakily returned to his seat, no longer having enough energy to stand. Why yes, that's a good question. While we cannot say for certain whether the answer we seek will be found in books, it never hurts to try. The PRF representative's voice gained conviction and strength as he continued to speak. Furthermore, there have been many geniuses in Konoha's great, long history. Surely one of them has thought about a similar issue in the past and had written it down for the future generations. The ABC representative opened his mouth to refute what the PRF representative was saying, but he was shut up as the PRF representative quickly said, "I'm not done speaking. You also forget, we the clones, along with the original, have promised to Iruka-sensei to practice our reading more in the future. This is simply a matter of hitting two birds with one stone." The momentum had completely reversed in the room, as one could almost imagine the ABC representative being launched back in his chair, fury on his face. Damn that PRF bastard. How can I argue against that? We all remember that promise. There's gotta be something, anything. Suddenly, the ABC rep's face lit up, before it grew into a devilish smirk, unsettling the clones of the PRF. They watched, as if in slow motion, as the ABC representative pointed towards a corner of the room and shouted, "What's that?" Each clone, as well as the original, turned their heads to see what the ABC representative was talking about, only to see nothing, and still in slow motion, they turned their heads back around to see the ABC representative lunged across the table, popping the PRF rep. "No!" shouted the various clones in the room. It was too late though, the deed was done, and immediately following the assassination, the ABC representative proceeded to burst itself, revealing its inner thoughts to the whole room. They consisted of, "His argument is too good. This is lost, I'm gonna pop him, then myself. It'll be pretty funny." It was absurd, the Narutos couldn't help themselves, as they began to laugh at the situation. Of course, their final decision had been made for them, as they now had all the memories of both factions' leaders. Making it official, the original stated, "With that, I declare the first meeting regarding the continued life of clones, closed." It was now time to head to the library en masse, as per the agreed upon plan. Each Naruto clone transformed before leaving the apartment, taking on various forms. They still wanted to keep the shadow clone jutsu a secret for as long as they could. It was the clone's first trip to one of Konoha's shinobi libraries. The original had never gone as a student, partially due to lack of interest, but also because most of the books were sealed to non-ninja, academy students included. The clone wasn't sure how many other clones were heading to the same library as him. After donning the henge, he had split off from the group amongst the crowds wandering Konoha's streets. Thinking back on it, maybe they should have planned it out a bit better, thereby ensuring that every library was hit. The clone just had to hope that they hadn't all chosen to head to the same library. He, himself, was heading to one of the lesser-known libraries. He'd never really seen anybody use it, as hidden as it was. It was located near the Hokage monuments, kind of out of the way. He only knew about it as he'd stumbled into it after one of his many stunts. Entering the library, he was surprised that no stopped him, or at least checked to make sure he was a Konoha ninja. Brushing it off, the clone continued in, arriving at a lobby-type area with a single desk in the middle. Looking around as he walked in more, the clone saw that there were three main sections to the library, labeled Genin, Chunin, and Jonin, clearly indicating what rank was required for each section. Thinking about what type of book he should read, the clone eventually arrived at the desk, originally expecting it to be empty, as he saw no one there. It was only when he was within a couple feet of it that he saw the air start to distort before he saw a member of the Anbu sitting at the desk. Startled, he stepped back, and the Anbu agent faded from his view. Prepared now, he once again approached the desk, with the Anbu reappearing as he neared. "First time, you must be a genin then, no? Got some form of identification with ya?" Reflexively, the clone pulled out his license, handing it over. Realizing his mistake halfway through, the clone resigned himself, as the Anbu snatched it from his hands. "Let's see here, Uzumaki, Naruto. The Anbu agent did a double take, as his hand landed on the tanto on his back. Quickly dropping the henge, the clone revealed himself, hurriedly stating, "Chill, chill. I was using a henge to travel incognito, and in a bout of cleverness, adding on, I'm sure you can imagine why." The Anbu agent relented at the explanation, yes. I suppose that does make sense. I know it's you now, you can put your henge back up if you want to. Anyway, you can pass. I'm sure you're aware, but Genin section only, alright." Taking his ID back, the clone reapplied his henge, hesitating for a moment, before asking, "Say, do you know where I could find some books on Fuinjutsu?" That caught the Anbu's attention. Fuinjutsu was some pretty advanced stuff, most Jonin knew little about it, much less a Genin. The Anbu voiced his concerns, Genin-san. You do realize that Fuinjutsu is pretty advanced stuff, right? Most Jonin don't even study it. In fact, the only two people who I can think of in the village who have more than a basic understanding of it are the Hokage, and one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya. Are you sure that's what you're looking for? That was new information to the clone, but it didn't really matter to it, it was just a passing curiosity. Surely the other clones would look at more reasonable material, so it couldn't be too bad for it to waste time looking at Fuinjutsu. Not to mention he liked the sound of it, only the Hokage and the Sannin knew it. That just sounded like something high class that they should learn. After all, one of the best ways to become Hokage would be by mimicking some of the stuff they'd learned, right? Yeah, I'm fine with Fuinjutsu related books, I just had heard a bit about it recently and was curious. Not to mention, it's my first time here anyway, I'm mostly just getting acquainted with the layout. The clone lied as it breathed, naturally, and with a certain amount of grace, and it completely convinced the Anbu agent. In that case, most of the books on Fuinjutsu stuff in the Genin section are on the last bookshelf on the left. It's not the most popular subject, so don't expect a whole lot. The clone thanked the man, before going off to find the books. Quickly, the clone found the section and identified two books of particular interest, Basics of Fuinjutsu, and Various Applications of Fuinjutsu. The clone began to flip through the first book, somewhat surprised with itself. It was reading it quite fast with the dyslexia and all. Only, it didn't notice, while any normal text appeared strange and confusing, as if it were in code, when it came to the Fuinjutsu itself, it seemingly naturally understood the meanings. The clone began to think about what the original had been missing out on. The experience was almost addictive. Little did the clone know, the rest of the clones, and the original, were having a much harder time with what they were reading. Before he knew it, he had finished the first book, not even noticing the passage of time. Sure, most of the information probably wouldn't fully stick, and it would require another go-through, but the experience was pleasurable overall. So pleasurable, that the clone picked up the next book, Various Applications of Fuinjutsu, and began to read through it as well. He saw various familiar concepts, like the storage scroll Choji used and the chakra weights that Lee had talked about. He'd even found what the Anbu agent was doing to disappear in the lobby. As it turned out, it was an application of Fuinjutsu that created a mirage to cloak a person from their surroundings. Only, it didn't work in the exact way recorded in the book. The person was supposed to be completely invisible, even at close range like the clone had been. Thinking about it, the clone flipped the book on the Basics of Fuinjutsu back open, quickly finding what he was looking for. While beginners of Fuinjutsu must strictly keep to formula, a master is capable of altering the formula to suit their needs. A prime example of such mastery came from the Uzumaki clan of the former Whirlpool country, which unfortunately, no longer exists, having been destroyed for fear of the very Fuinjutsu they had mastery over. It was a funny coincidence. Naruto, an orphan, had been given the name Uzumaki in honor of the once allies of Konoha, and now here he was, a clone of Naruto, learning about Fuinjutsu and the Uzumaki. Between that, and the Hokage being one of the few figures said to have mastered Fuinjutsu, the clone thought it might be a good skill to look into more. Not to mention the words, destroyed for fear of the very Fuinjutsu they had mastery over, was a pretty fancy way of saying that the Uzumaki's Fuinjutsu was too powerful to the point that they needed to be stopped. That sounded like a good skill for Hokage, as great as the original was going to be. Everything the clone had learned so far about Fuinjutsu pointed to it being an extremely valuable skill for their future develop, and it figured the other clones as well as the original would see it in the same way. Not really expecting any more bombshells of information, the clone continued flipping through the pages of the book, only to burst from its seating position as it read the description of one of the Fuinjutsu. Not bothering to put away the 2 books it had off the shelves, the clone ran off out of the library in excitement, leaving behind a confused girl in the lobby. The girl who had just started her shift thought to herself, was there supposed to be a genin in the library? Looking through the logbook, she found her answer, Uzumaki Naruto. 8:32 a.m. Interested in Fuinjutsu. Moving incognito under a henge of a black-haired boy. The boy who'd run off fit the description, but that log entry was for the day before, and no one had entered the library since that entry. Thinking that that couldn't possibly be the same boy, the girl entered into the genin section to try to see if she could figure out what he might have been reading. Starting from the more popular material and working her way down, she at last arrived at the Fuinjutsu section. Cursing herself in her mind for not checking there first, she, in disbelief, looked at what books the boy had been reading. Basics of Fuinjutsu had been flipped open to a section pertaining towards some history of Fuinjutsu, and it also talked a bit about the collapse of the Whirlpool country. She wasn't that well versed in Fuinjutsu, but she knew enough history to know about that incident. Casually taking a look at the other book, it was flipped to a page on Fuinjutsu, Chakra Suppression Seal. A weird place to leave off reading, she shrugged, picking up the 2 books and returning them to shelves. That Uzumaki boy must have gotten bored of the books yesterday and up and ran off. That black-haired boy from just now though, I guess I'm going to have to write up a report about him. I should have stopped him, could have saved me from doing the paperwork. Angrily, the girl returned to the desk, not eager to write up the report anytime soon. After all, she had a lot of free time considering no one came to that library anyway. Author's note. This is my pop-off moment. Woke up this morning, felt like shit, was tired, decided to start writing anyway, had a real hard time with it. Took a break, came back to it, rewrote everything I wrote to make it flow nicer. Then, I just didn't stop, the rage fueled me. And here we are, my longest chapter to date, by around 1,000 words, too. Hope it's a banger for y'all to read. I think it's good but can't really tell because I'm half loopy right now. Hope y'all enjoy.